Akira asked Alpha if, while he was there practicing with his scanner, he could also pick up a few relics along the way. Alpha replied that she didn't mind, but there wasn't anything valuable left in the ruins. Still, it would be good training. Akira smiled at this, and Alpha then informed him Elena and Sarah were there, pointing at their direction. Akira revved up and drove toward them. Elena noticed him first, and Sarah greeted him, curious about what brought him to such a well-picked ruin. Akira explained that it was the perfect spot to train with his scanner. Sarah agreed, and Elena added that they were also there for training, but not for themselves. They were helping some other people out, as that was their current job. Suddenly, a truck approached, and out came Katsuya and his group. Yumina said they should do well today so they wouldn't need any more babysitting. Irie chimed in, saying they'd finally be full-fledged hunters after this. Katsuya then noticed someone standing with Elena and Sarah. He recognized Akira from the other day and wondered what he was doing with them. Then it hit him. Wasn't Akira the guy who took on that emergency mission alone and survived? Back with Akira, he commented that this ruin felt different from Kuzuhara, even though they were both from the old world. Alpha explained that Higuraka was from a different era. When Akira asked what she meant, Alpha elaborated, saying the term, old world, encompassed a long stretch of history. It was a cycle of civilizations collapsing and being rebuilt. Even Kugamayama, Akira's hometown, might be called Kugamayama City Ruins, in another 100 years. Akira was amazed by this newfound knowledge, but Alpha quickly snapped him back to reality, finding the perfect spot to begin his training. She instructed him to use his scanner to explore the ruins on his own. Akira complained that it was easy for her to say, but he didn't have a clue how to use the thing. Alpha, ever helpful, said she'd bring up the manual so he could put his reading skills to the test, leaving him to figure it out himself. Akira, not thrilled but determined, agreed since there weren't any tough monsters around. Giving it a shot, he activated the scanner, and suddenly, it was displaying all sorts of information. One marker appeared on top of a building. He squinted, trying to figure out what it meant, but before he could, Alpha interrupted, warning him about a monster lurking in the alley to his left. She continued, casually mentioning another monster hiding in the wall to his right, just above him. Akira groaned, pointing out that he was supposed to be doing this alone. Alpha quickly retorted that he should handle threats before she even needed to tell him. Reluctantly, Akira agreed and, not long after, spotted a monster before Alpha could give him a heads up. Alpha couldn't resist commenting that he barely noticed it in time. Akira realized just how tricky it was, riding his motorbike, spotting threats, and shooting all at once. There was no choice but to keep practicing until he could do it all on his own. Then, as he was riding along, something made him stop. He noticed a massive hole in one of the buildings. Akira asked Alpha about it, confused. Weren't all the monsters here supposed to be weak? Alpha agreed that Akira was right about the monsters being weak, but pointed out that their information might be outdated, and there were no guarantees. So, it was best for him to stay on his toes. Meanwhile, over with Katsuya's group, Elena told them to explore the ruins however they liked. Although she doubted they'd find any valuable relics, their searching methods would still be evaluated. She added that while the monsters here didn't pose much danger, life had a funny way of throwing curveballs, so staying vigilant was essential. Afterward, they'd give them the results of their evaluation. With that, the trio took off at full speed. Elena hadn't expected to bump into Akira, which was a surprise. Sarah agreed and mentioned that Akira's bike probably wasn't a rental, though she wasn't entirely sure. Elena thinks that what Sarah said was right. He also bought a scanner. It just meant that he did well for himself in the fight for the city. Akira have been working hard too, huh? Elena was impressed, joking that if they weren't careful, Akira might surpass them soon. Sarah chuckled and agreed, adding that she still wanted to stay ahead of him for a bit longer. Akira then stumbled upon a large mansion, thinking it could hold some valuable relics. Alpha wasn't as optimistic but said it would be excellent scanner practice, at least. So, Akira decided to check it out, but inside, it was completely barren. Alpha remarked that it had probably been picked clean by countless hunters who all thought the same thing as Akira. As they moved further inside, another room turned out to be just as empty. Disappointed, Akira was about to head back when Alpha noticed something unusual and told him to enter the next room. She explained that there appeared to be a secret door, likely leading to a basement. Akira checked it out, curious, and asked how she spotted it. Alpha, sounding proud, mentioned that her superior processing power had analyzed the data from his scanner. Akira, slightly amused by her self-congratulatory tone, opened the secret door, revealing a dark entrance. Holding a flashlight in his mouth, Akira descended the ladder. When he reached the bottom, all that greeted him was another empty room. Alpha apologized, suggesting someone else must have already found it and cleared everything out. Akira didn't seem too bothered, even thinking there might be another hidden room somewhere. But Alpha, usually able to detect everything, found no signs of anything else. If she couldn't find it, it probably wasn't there. Akira glanced around, thinking he might spot some light shining through a crack, only to realize that wouldn't work underground. Just then, Alpha chimed in, telling him the effort wasn't wasted. Akira, confused, asked what she had found. Alpha highlighted something in augmented reality for him, showing a mark drawn in clear, glowing paint. Akira's scanner had barely picked it up, even at max sensitivity. He asked what kind of basement this was, but since he was already there, he figured he might as well try it. Akira stood where he was supposed to, and suddenly, a woman dressed as a maid appeared in front of him. He asked Alpha what was going on, but she replied that nothing was happening. Akira, clearly unnerved, told her there was a lady standing right in front of him. Alpha, now alarmed, immediately activated his suit, pulling Akira away from the strange woman. Demanding an explanation, Akira wanted to know why Alpha had done that, but Alpha was the one firing off questions, asking if he had a headache, felt nauseous, or can still think clearly. Alpha asked if Akira could still hear her and if he could still see the mysterious woman. Akira, confused, assured her he was fine. Relieved, Alpha asked if the woman was still visible, but Akira replied that she had disappeared. He then demanded an explanation. Alpha explained that Akira had narrowly escaped death. When he asked for clarification, Alpha reminded him that the me he sees as a form of augmented reality. Akira recalled this, and Alpha continued, explaining that the woman he saw was similar. To perceive such entities, one must receive their data. People known as old domain users can do this, and apparently, Akira was one of them. Akira, perplexed, wondered what that meant for him. Alpha elaborated. If he absorbed too much data, his brain wouldn't be able to process it, which could result in instant death. Fortunately, his compatibility allowed him to handle her data, but if he had been incompatible with that mysterious lady's transmission, Akira interrupted, asking what would have happened. Alpha answered bluntly. He would have dropped dead the moment he saw her. Naturally, Akira asked if Alpha could do anything about it. Snapping into her AI mode, Alpha replied, stating that to prevent fatal damage to Akira's life support systems, she could act as a relay for incoming information from network sources. Akira, not fully grasping the tech talk, gave Alpha the go-ahead anyway, and she registered his consent. Returning to her usual self, Alpha reassured him that with the filter she had set up, he should be reasonably safe. Akira, still curious, asked if this was more of the red tape she had mentioned before. Would he encounter many situations like this? Alpha confirmed, advising him not to ask for too many details. When Akira asked why, she cheekily responded that it would take a century to explain everything, but if he really insisted, she'd try. Akira, wisely, decided to skip the deep dive into AI mechanics. With his permission, Alpha activated the relay, and together they re-engaged with the mysterious woman. This time, the woman greeted Akira, asking if he'd like to register as a new user. Akira politely declined but attempted to ask her a few questions. Before he could get answers, the woman vanished into thin air. Baffled, Akira turned to Alpha for an explanation. Alpha guessed that the woman might disappear if he rejected her offer, but they could try getting her to transmit data to Akira's terminal directly. Akira stepped back into the marked area and asked the woman if she could send her data to his terminal. She agreed and thanked him for using their services, but Alpha found that no data was coming through. It wasn't in a format Akira's terminal could handle. Alpha suggested that although risky, they could try retrieving the data through Akira himself, assuring him that she'd take every precaution. Akira, ever the risk-taker, agreed, reasoning that danger came with the job of being a hunter. Alpha warned him to be alert to any strange sensations and to get out if things felt off. After a tense moment, Alpha informed Akira that the transfer was complete, and all was safe. Akira, surprised, asked why he hadn't felt anything. Alpha explained that she'd handled the entire transfer, keeping him out of it while she directly received the data. Curious about the lady's true nature, Akira asked what she was, but Alpha playfully deflected, saying it was a long story for another time. Meanwhile, Katsuya's group continued their exploration. Elena and Sarah kept an eye on them as they moved through the ruins. Two members of the group entered a building to search for relics while the third stood guard outside. Their strategy was simple. If they encountered any monsters, they would abandon their search and regroup to take it down. They rotated roles frequently to avoid anyone getting too stressed, or too complacent. Katsuya's tactics seemed solid to Elena, but it was all textbook relic hunting. He didn't have high hopes, and sure enough, everything they found was practically junk. Yumina, ever the voice of reason, reminded him that Sarah and Elena had already warned them the place had been picked clean. Katsuya sighed, wishing they could borrow some high-end scanners like they used in the Kuzuhara ruins. Yumina agreed. Those scanners could even pick up old domain AR data. Speaking of which, she brought up how Katsuya once mentioned seeing something weird in AR back then. She asked what it was all about. Katsuya, clearly flustered, mumbled something about corrupted data making things look strange and quickly changed the topic. He asked Yumina to call Irie over instead. As Yumina stepped out, Katsuya thought back to what he saw. It wasn't his imagination. There had been an AR girl floating beside him, and even though she spoke, he couldn't understand her. Then, poof, she vanished. He definitely couldn't tell Yumina and Irie about the naked AR ghost girl. They'd never let him live it down. Their bags were loaded with relics now. Katsuya asked Yumina how much she thought they'd make from the haul. Yumina shot him a calming look and reminded him that this was just a training exercise. The value of their finds didn't really matter. He shouldn't stress over it. He knew she was right, but before he could complain, Yumina cut him off and told him to get moving. For Katsuya, though, this much wasn't enough. Ordinary success wasn't enough. Average strength would only lead to an average death. Memories of his past failures burned in his mind. He needed more power. Enough to save his comrades, enough to save everyone. As Katsuya was lost in thought, something clicked. There was one more thing. At the time, he'd thought it was just a glitch, but now, he was sure. If he could focus his scanner on that area and crank up the sensitivity, He found it. His heart raced as he told Yumina and Irie to scan the spot he was pointing at. When they did, their faces went pale with shock. A gluttonous crocodile was lurking in the ruins. They wondered how on earth it got there. Glutton crocs weren't supposed to be in Higuraku, but there it was. For Irie, this was a terrifying surprise, and she immediately recognized the danger they were in. Yumina praised Katsuya for spotting it, suggesting they could avoid the beast entirely. But then Katsuya, with a determined look, declared that they should kill it. Yumina and Irie exchanged shocked glances. Yumina asked if Katsuya was serious about hunting the gluttonous crocodile. Katsuya explained that since the beast hadn't noticed them yet, they could hit it hard and fast, giving them a chance to win. Yumina considered this and admitted that maybe they could, but questioned why they should take such a risk. Katsuya looked down and reluctantly agreed, admitting that maybe he just didn't have what it took. He apologized and suggested they leave, but Yumina sighed and said she'd check with Elena first. After some discussion, Yumina managed to get Elena on board with taking down the croc. Katsuya asked if she was sure. Yumina said that if he wanted to back out, he could take it up with Elena himself. Without warning, Katsuya grabbed Yumina, thanking her with an enthusiasm that made her visibly embarrassed. He apologized for deciding on his own but insisted he needed her help to bring down the croc. Irie chimed in, saying she was in too, and with that, the group was set. Sarah asked Elena if she was really okay with this, concerned that the group was relying on their backup too much. Elena explained that this was a test. If they refused, Yumina would have known that they were over their head. She admired Yumina's guts, and now Sarah understood why. Yumina told the team she had arranged for Elena and Sarah to back them up but to pretend they were far away. By pretend, it was clear they were nearby. Irie remarked that the longer they waited, the more respect they'd lose. Yumina agreed, which meant they had to step in fast. If Elena and Sarah thought they weren't ready, they'd swoop in immediately. Katsuya knew it was now or never. He double-checked their equipment and, much to his relief, didn't see any heavy armor on the croc. Yumina warned that glutton crocs adopt traits from what they eat, so if this one had snacked on any tanks recently, they were in for trouble. Katsuya instructed them to use their strongest ammo and not hold back. With a countdown from 5, they opened fire, determined to win. The first volley of shots caught the croc by surprise, sending it into a frenzy as it charged toward them. They kept firing, not giving it a moment to recover. Yumina remarked that it was still standing, and boy, was it tough. Katsuya reassured her they could still take it down. From atop a nearby building, Elena and Sarah observed. Sarah asked if they should help, noticing the group was starting to struggle. Elena decided to give them a little more time. The croc was getting closer, but the group unleashed another barrage of firepower. Just when they thought they had it beat, the croc regenerated, catching them completely off guard. The beast was only meters away now, and Sarah readied her rifle, carefully aiming at the monster. Katsuya began doubting himself. Was this it for him? Could he really not turn the tide, no matter how hard he tried? Akira had won his fight and returned stronger. Katsuya wanted that power, craved it. If only he could make a difference, to have that kind of strength in his own hands. Then, suddenly, she appeared again, the AR girl from the Kuzuhara ruins. Just like Alpha, she floated beside Katsuya, wrapping her arms around his neck. In an instant, one of Katsuya's bullets pierced through the croc's head, triggering a chain reaction as it ricocheted off other bullets, taking the beast down for good before it could regenerate again. The team stood there, confused. Did they really kill it? Elena and Sarah praised the group for their impressive work, noting they'd report the results to Druncamp. They also advised the team to head back home before they ran into any more trouble. The group thanked Elena and Sarah for their support as they drove off toward home. Sarah turned to Elena, asking if Akira had made it back safely with all the gluttonous crocs around. Elena decided to give him a call just to check. Akira picked up while riding his motorcycle, apologizing because he was a bit busy. Understanding that, Elena kept it brief and warned him that they had run into a gluttonous crocodile, so she wanted to make sure he was aware in case he was still in the ruins. Akira thanked them and promised to be careful. Elena reminded him to call if he ran into any trouble and said goodbye. Even though they called just to warn him, Akira was already deep into a fight with another gluttonous crocodile. This one was even more dangerous, equipped with a turret, far more deadly than the one Katsuya's group had faced. While speeding on his motorcycle, Akira took aim and shot at the monster's gun, which was fortunately the croc's last line of offense. Now, all he had to do was finish the fight, but Akira doubted whether he could really kill it. Every time he shot off one of the creature's heads, another one grew back, leaving no end in sight. Alpha chimed in, suggesting Akira use the CWH proprietary ammo. Akira hesitated, reminding her that it was reserved for emergencies only. Alpha argued that if this situation didn't count as an emergency, nothing did. She told him to load the special ammo and head for the street up ahead. Despite Akira's efforts, the monster refused to let up its chase. Akira quickly ditched his bike and readied his rifle. As the beast bore down on him, Akira fired. This time, he managed to blast through both heads at once with a shot so powerful it pierced straight through the creature. The gunfire echoed through the empty ruin, and at long last, the croc went down for good. Akira, admiring the destruction, couldn't help but praise the punch that special ammo packed. No wonder it was so expensive. Still, between the CWH and the AP ammo, this fight had cost him more than just some bullets. It was practically his entire paycheck. Alpha reassured him, saying she had signed him up for a generic extermination job, which would at least help cover part of the bill. She also reminded him that the trip to the basement earlier had been worthwhile, so he shouldn't feel too down about the cost. With that, they called it a day and decided to head back. Back in Kugamayama City, Sarah asked Elena about the report. Elena replied that she'd given the team some well-deserved credit without overhyping them. Still, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about how they managed to kill the croc, even if it was just a lucky shot. Sarah then asked about Druncam's recruitment offer. She knew they were keeping it on hold for now, but wondered what Elena thought about it. Elena answered honestly, admitting she was torn. On one hand, they could rely on Druncam's support if they signed on. It might even help with Sarah's nanomachine bills. But Sarah knew it would come at the cost of the freedom they were used to. Elena hated to put this on Sarah but told her the decision was hers to make. Either way, she wouldn't complain. Sarah thanked Elena for being so considerate. Meanwhile, back at Akira's hotel, Akira was still puzzled by the mysterious woman in the maid outfit. He asked Alpha who she was. Alpha explained that the place was basically a virtual temp agency. Akira was confused, wondering what the point was in hiring someone who wasn't really there. Akira questioned Alpha about the purpose of hiring someone who's not really there. Alpha explained that many jobs only require seeing, hearing, and answering questions. She pointed out that Akira already had proof in front of him, and Akira, although hesitant, accepted her point. Alpha then shifted gears and warned him to keep the encounter with the maid a secret, especially since she never told him he was an old domain user. She explained that the less Akira knew, the safer he was from exposure. Now that Akira knew, he had to keep it quiet, or risk becoming a test subject, with an autopsy waiting to happen. That sent a chill down Akira's spine. Maybe ignorance was bliss, or was knowing better than being caught off guard. Either way, he longed for the days when his biggest concern was being stuck in a well. Alpha, sensing his worry, reassured him that staying under the radar was easier than he thought. All he needed to do was keep his mouth shut, and she would handle the rest. With that pep talk over, she moved on to the real prize. She mentioned that the maid belonged to Lion's Tail Inc., a relic of the old world that still had some operational facilities. Through their network, Alpha had found coordinates to all their installations and branches, meaning a potential treasure hunt lay ahead. Akira's eyes lit up at the thought of undiscovered ruins, imagining the wealth of relics they might find. Alpha confirmed his suspicions, saying if they followed those coordinates, they'd stumble upon a treasure trove. Akira was ready to head out, brimming with excitement, but Alpha quickly grounded him. There was no way he'd haul all those relics on his motorcycle. His enthusiasm deflated. He'd have to wait until he could afford a car. But even with the disappointment, the promise of future treasure kept his spirits up. It was a goal to work toward, and that would keep him motivated. Meanwhile, at Druncam HQ, the sounds of gunfire echoed throughout the training center. Inside, Katsuya was hitting bullseyes, showing definite improvement compared to his last attempts. But even though his aim had gotten better, it was clear that the mysterious AR girl was the reason for his success. Just who was she? Inside the Druncam facility, Katsuya and his team were summoned. Arabe congratulated them on their progress, informing them they would now operate without a supervisor. He introduced Mizuha, their new point of contact, who warmly greeted them. With that, Arabe exited the room. Elena and Sarah had turned down Druncam's recruitment offer, but at least they wouldn't have to deal with those rookie issues anymore. Arabe joked that this should make Shikarabe less cranky, and then he left. In the room, Mizuha took Katsuya's hand, brimming with enthusiasm. She praised his glowing report and expressed her eagerness to provide the best opportunities for him. She even mentioned lining up municipal jobs, which she couldn't wait to discuss with him. Katsuya felt a bit awkward and asked if they could make their own decisions. Mizuha seemed to understand but then suggested they first assist with the temporary base they were building. Irie and Yumina, observing the exchange, sensed something was amiss. Meanwhile, Akira was gearing up to help build a forward base. Alpha explained that his role was to rescue anyone attacked by monsters at the site. Akira, already aware, set off to gather his work terminal. Fate, however, seemed to be playing tricks on him as he drew number 14 again. On his motorcycle, he zoomed from one distress call to another, unable to catch a break. Arriving at a distress site, Akira helped clear out the monsters. He repeated this process several times, assisting hunters in need. As exhaustion set in, Akira popped some meds, only to find them less effective than expected. Alpha explained these were cheap capsules, far inferior to old-world medicines. He'd need to take a mountain of them to feel any effect, which is probably why hunters overdo it. Alpha advised finishing one more rescue before taking a break. Akira used his motorcycle to navigate into a building but was halted by Alpha. Akira asked why did she told him to stop. Was it because there's too much rubble to drive through? She informed him that there were too many monsters, not just rubble, and used her AR system to pinpoint their locations. The monsters were Urata scorpions, masters of camouflage. Realizing his oversight, Akira fired at the scorpions, which proved to be tough opponents. Alpha noted their resilience and their trick of playing dead. He needed to eliminate them thoroughly before moving on. The Urata scorpions emerged and attacked Akira, but he dispatched them quickly. After clearing them out, he moved to another location and successfully rescued 3 hunters. The 3 hunters were happy that they were saved. Alpha commented that it's a good thing they made it on time. Akira were pleased with this because he can finally rest. Exhausted, he reported back, intending to return to the base. However, Sector 4 HQ refused his request to return, instructing him to send the rescued targets back alone and proceed with his next mission. Akira argued, pointing out he had just fought through a Urata scorpion-infested building. He couldn't undertake another mission without resupplying. The HQ staff murmured something urgently, prompting Akira to inquire about the issue. They asked if the building was a Urata scorpion nest. Not knowing for sure, Akira only confirmed it was crawling with them. The HQ then hastily rescinded their previous order, directing him to return to the base immediately. Akira used the speaker to relay the message to everyone, instructing them to head back to the base. However, one of the hunters insisted on guarding them all the way. Alpha then advised Akira to either abandon them immediately or order them to the base as quickly as possible. A swarm of Urata scorpions suddenly drew near, and Akira shouted for everyone to run. He fired at the scorpions, trying to slow them down and urge the hunters to make a hasty escape. As he shot, he muttered curses, noting that AP ammo wasn't cheap but was effective enough to take down the scorpions in a single shot. Looking back, Akira noticed the hunters had halted. Alpha explained that more scorpions had circled ahead to trap them. Akira hopped onto his bike and sped toward the encirclement. As he drew closer, it was clear they were completely surrounded and struggling to fight back. Akira accelerated and used his bike to slide and smash into the scorpions, clearing out large numbers of them with each pass. He then leapt off the bike and fired his rifle. Alpha reminded him that he was out of AP ammo and needed to switch rifles. With his last AP magazine spent, Akira switched to his 2 rifles loaded with regular ammo and continued firing. He jumped into the fray, landing hard on one of the scorpions and crushing it. He kicked and shot at the remaining scorpions, but he was running low on normal ammo. He asked Alpha what to do next. Alpha presented 2 options: attempt melee combat or abandon the hunters and head for the base. Akira chose to hold out as long as he could, but Alpha detected a car approaching. Relief washed over Akira as the backup finally arrived, gunning down dozens of scorpions. The man in the car instructed them to get in, and Alpha told Akira to leave it to him and head out. Akira agreed, and he drove off, unaware that the backup was actually Katsuya. Back at the HQ, a staff member greeted Akira and took his terminal. The staffer mentioned that clearing the area had stirred up a massive scorpion nest and asked if Akira wanted to join the operation to resecure the base's surroundings. Remembering what just happened earlier, he declined. Alpha commented that it's finally over. Akira agreed. Although it's exhausting, he can finally rest now. While walking, he noticed hunters enjoying sandwiches and laughing, which made his stomach growl. They had set up food stands, and Alpha asked if he wanted to grab a bite while they were still there. Akira saw that a hot sandwich cost 980 orum, which seemed steep but possibly just wasteland pricing. Alpha asked if he wanted to skip it, but Akira had already waited in line, noting that the place seemed popular. The girl at the stand greeted him, and Akira ordered a sandwich. She pointed to a scanner, indicating he should place his card there for payment. Confused, Akira realized card meant his hunter ID. To his surprise, the girl behind the stand was Cheryl, who was delighted to run into him. Akira was puzzled about why Cheryl was there, and she thanked him for his purchase. He asked what she was doing out there, and was surprised to see Katsuragi greet him. Inside Katsuragi's truck, Katsuragi mentioned that he hadn't sold relics since their last transaction. He reminded Akira that he had agreed to help Cheryl in exchange for his finds and questioned the reason behind Akira's change in focus. Akira explained that he was currently concentrating on monster hunting. He added that he used to hunt relics in Kuzuhara and implied that Katsuragi should be aware of the situation there now. Katsuragi, understanding Akira's predicament, couldn't really blame him but reminded Akira not to forget their deal. Katsuragi seemed to ponder something, realizing that Akira hadn't abandoned Cheryl but had merely shifted his business elsewhere. This was good news for Katsuragi, who was investing in Cheryl with the expectation that Akira would eventually sell relics to him. Akira then inquired about Cheryl's presence. She explained that thanks to Akira and Mr. Katsuragi, she had the opportunity to work various jobs. Katsuragi seized the moment to order another sandwich. Cheryl cheerfully took his plate, promising to bring one for Akira as well. Katsuragi took the chance to ask Akira if he had noticed Cheryl's transformation and if he had done anything to her. Akira was just as clueless, noting that Cheryl had started acting differently one day without any explanation. Katsuragi mused over this, noting that Cheryl was quite different from when they first met. While this change was beneficial for business, as she now makes a better partner and is good at charming customers, Katsuragi found it intriguing. He revealed that the sandwich shop was actually Cheryl's idea, and it was selling like hotcakes. Akira was surprised to learn that Katsuragi wasn't the one running the shop. Katsuragi admitted that he preferred to stay out of the restaurant business and acknowledged that the shop was entirely Cheryl's venture. Cheryl returned with the sandwiches and a coffee. As Akira bit into his sandwich, he asked if Cheryl was involved in making and selling them, which impressed him. Cheryl thanked him with a smile, saying she couldn't have done it without him and Mr. Katsuragi. Katsuragi leaned in and asked Akira if he was sure he hadn't done anything to influence Cheryl's change. Akira was adamant that he hadn't done anything. Back at his hotel, Akira went straight for a bath. It had been a grueling day, and he described the Urata scorpions as particularly tough. Alpha agreed, noting that someday Akira would need to handle small fry like them with ease. Akira enjoyed his bath, resolved to figure things out eventually. Akira told Shizuka about his ordeal with the Urata scorpions the previous day, and she was incredulous at the sheer number he encountered. Akira agreed, mentioning that his gun, the AAH, barely made a dent. Thankfully, He had his CWH on hand. Shizuka suggested he should consider upgrading his AAH to handle Urata scorpions more effectively. She recommended installing custom parts and switching to overpressure ammo. At that moment, a voice from inside a room in Shizuka's store was heard asking for a moment. The voice sounded familiar, and Akira suspected it was Elena. Shizuka asked Akira to wait a moment and went inside. Elena's voice, filled with shock at hearing Akira was there, could be heard. Shizuka then pushed Elena out of the room and explained that Elena was wearing a B3CSD-powered suit. Unlike Akira's suit, which uses an exoskeleton for support, Elena's suit starts out baggy but shrinks to fit when activated, clinging tightly to her skin. Shizuka asked for Akira's opinion, which made him a bit embarrassed. To him, the suit seemed overly flashy, and he suggested Elena might want to wear something over it. Shizuka, now feeling a bit awkward, dashed back into the room, slamming the door behind her. Akira, shaking off the awkwardness, shifted the topic and asked if Shizuka could recommend some parts for his gun. Later, at Akira's hotel, Alpha informed him that he had received a personal job offer through the Hunter office. Akira was surprised, and Alpha explained that while this was technically good news, the job was rather tricky. In essence, Akira was tasked with exterminating Urata scorpions. Akira immediately refused, but Alpha noted that turning down the offer would put him at odds with the Kugamayama Department of Long-Term Strategy, making him unpopular in the city. Akira considered this and suggested presenting them with demands they would likely refuse, such as paying up front for all CWH, proprietary ammo, or allowing him to retreat whenever he chose. Alpha thought this was a solid plan, as it would make the conditions unreasonable enough for the client to reject, allowing Akira to refuse without angering the city. The next morning, Alpha delivered some bad news. The city approved all of Akira's conditions, leaving him stunned. At the Cartridge Freak, Akira asked Shizuka how many rounds of CWH, proprietary ammo she could gather for him immediately. Shizuka was taken aback and asked what he was planning to fight. Akira explained that he was stuck with the Urata scorpion extermination job and everything that had happened so far. Shizuka understood the situation. Given the scorpions were likely both powerful and numerous, she agreed to get as much ammo as she could and promised to include additional rounds of his other types of ammunition. Akira thanked her. As Akira prepared to leave, Shizuka hugged him and told him to make sure he come back alive, which Akira reassured that he will. At the Kuzushihara Ruins Urata Scorpion Extermination HQ, a man approached Akira and inquired if he had signed up for the scorpion hunt. Akira confirmed, and though the man noted Akira was still a kid, it didn't matter much to him. He then asked if Akira wanted security or reconnaissance. Akira opted for whichever was easier, which irritated the man. He questioned if Akira was joking, but Akira was dead serious about wanting the easiest and safest job available. The man, looking down on Akira, assigned him to security, claiming he would just need to stand lookout in areas that had already been cleared. Akira was stationed at checkpoint 14 and dismissed. As the man spoke behind Akira's back, disparaging him as spoiled and assuming his record was unimpressive, he took a closer look at Akira's credentials and was taken aback. A gate then opened, and the guard instructed Akira to proceed inside. Akira followed, asking why they were in a basement. As soon as he entered, the gate shut behind him. The room was filled with explosives. One of the guards explained that these bombs served as their insurance. They would detonate them to trap the scorpion swarms before they reached the surface. Akira inquired about their fate if that happened, to which the guard replied that if they did their job, they'd be far away or dead. As expected, Akira thought, and he proceeded down the stairs into the Kuzushihara Ruins underground shopping district. Alpha explained that the hunters working to clear out the scorpions were divided into 3 main teams: reconnaissance, extermination, and security. The recon team maps out the area and locates nests. The extermination team destroys the nests, expands the safe zone, and provides backup, while the security team mostly defends specific points. This role is safer and easier, so it's assigned to hunters who didn't make it into the other 2 teams. Akira then asked if it was all just a cakewalk. It never hurts to ask, he reasoned. Alpha reminded him, though she shouldn't have to, not to let his guard down. He knew this, but he was just relieved that it seemed easier than he had expected. They then arrived at checkpoint 14. Akira noticed something and leapt back. It was a lady in a maid outfit, and he immediately informed Alpha. Despite his retreat, the maid remained. Alpha calmed him down, explaining that she was not an augmented reality projection. Akira was confused, but Alpha clarified that the person was real. Nearby hunters grumbled about another kid and questioned what the HQ was thinking. One remarked that HQ must have considered the area so safe that even children could guard it. Another hunter agreed, noting that they had even sent someone with a maid. A girl commented that Akira was overreacting. The girl suggested to the maid, named Shiori, that she should wear something else. Shiori reassured her that she didn't mind the attention, though it was actually meant for the young miss. Akira then asked the complaining hunters if they were in charge of the area. The man replied that no one was in command. If Akira wanted a babysitter, he should join Katsuya's group. Katsuya seemed surprised to see Akira, but Akira ignored him and walked away. He sat on the floor, removing his backpack. The young miss asked Akira's name, and he replied, Akira. She then asked why he was on his own and invited him to join them. Akira declined, saying he was fine where he was. The girl questioned his refusal, assuming he was trying to avoid work. Akira denied this, stating that he wasn't slacking off and had no plans to. The girl insisted he was lying, pointing out that he had been sitting quietly the whole time. Akira showed her his terminal and explained that he was running wide area scans for threats. The girl, now embarrassed, gritted her teeth and asked for his hunter rank. Akira proudly answered 20. The girl, rank 23, declared that she outranked him and demanded that he stand up and join them. Akira calmly replied that no one had told him to obey higher-ranked hunters, so he didn't have to listen to her. Reina insisted that's how things work, but Katsuya intervened. He explained to Akira that despite Reina's prickly demeanor, she was just concerned for him. He reasoned that he'd be much safer with a larger group if things went wrong. Akira responded coldly, saying they could forget about him if trouble arose and let him fend for himself if necessary, which shocked both Reina and Katsuya. Reina then pulled on Katsuya's arm. Reina declared that if Akira wanted to die alone, it was no concern of hers. Alpha commented on how colorful these characters were, and Akira agreed, betting they had been bickering long before he arrived. At least his contract allowed him to decide when to go solo or cut and run. The assignment might not be as bad as he thought. Alpha considered that they might be troublemakers, but Akira was likely the most dangerous when provoked. She needed to observe him more to understand what drove him. As time passed, no monsters appeared. Katsuya had been staring at Akira for a while, which caught Reina's attention. She asked what was going on, but Katsuya quickly dismissed it as nothing. Two men from earlier whispered about how many relics had turned up in unexplored parts of the tunnels, surprising their companion, who wished he were on the recon team. The other man noted that they couldn't just walk away with relics, as it would breach their contract. He speculated that if he were in their shoes, he'd hide the relics somewhere only he could find. The man smirked, thinking that someone might have left a cache of relics nearby. Reina then noticed the two men leaving and demanded to know where they were going. They claimed they were doing a quick sweep of the perimeter, but Reina insisted they were there to guard, not patrol, and ordered them to stick to their duty. Finding this annoying, the men asked Akira for his opinion. He replied that if they needed a bathroom break, they should make it quick. He warned them that if they were gone too long, he would call HQ to check on them. This response surprised Reina and pleased the men, who admitted they needed a bathroom break. In fact, one could barely hold it in, which enraged Reina. She questioned Akira's thinking, asking how he could let them get away like that. Akira simply stated that he had no authority to stop them and that if she had complaints, she should take them up with HQ. If she wanted Akira to threaten them to make them stay, she should do it herself. He wouldn't stop her. At a loss for words, Reina left, shouting that HQ would hear about everything that happened. Later, she couldn't believe HQ ignored the slackers from earlier. Yumina suggested she give up, and Irie added that the place was so safe HQ didn't care if they slacked off. Reina agreed and asked Katsuya to patrol as well. Katsuya immediately refused, but Reina retorted, saying that why the need to stay put while they don't. Katsuya explained that the checkpoint would be too risky if they all left. He then approached Reina and told her he didn't want to see her acting like the slackers. This embarrassed Reina, who couldn't even meet his gaze. She admitted that Katsuya had beaten her in their mock battle and, since she promised to follow his orders if she lost, she would put up with this for now. Katsuya thanked her, though Yumina and Irie looked displeased. Shiori then joined the conversation, stating that she couldn't approve of their reckless expeditions. She explained that this was a wasteland, a place of extreme danger, fundamentally different from the walled districts. Still brooding over the situation, thought that she might be being fatally naive. Reina, she wished for the respect that Katsuya seemed to command and wondered if this job would ever give her a chance to prove herself. Just then, a device announced that it was HQ calling for checkpoint 14. HQ inquired if there was anything unusual to report. The man at the checkpoint reported that everything was calm, even peaceful. HQ then informed them that checkpoint 15 had come under attack from an area they had previously deemed safe. They suspected that the Scorpions had opened a new route. The man quickly grasped the situation and asked if they wanted them to be on alert for a possible attack at their location as well. HQ replied that wasn't necessary. Instead, they wanted them to form a team to reinvestigate the area. The man said he and his buddy would handle it, but HQ insisted that the job wasn't suited for them and told them to stay at their posts. Reina smirked, thinking it served them right. The man asked who would be sent, given that they only had some inexperienced recruits and their babysitters. HQ responded that Akira, designated as 27, would handle it. HQ continued, stating that Akira could go alone or choose up to 2 others. Hearing this, Akira grabbed his bag, which surprised Katsuya, who watched as Akira prepared to leave. The man then asked why Akira was chosen and if they were sure they weren't thinking of someone else. HQ explained that, based on combat records, 27 was the best choice. The man questioned what Akira had done that was so impressive. HQ revealed that Akira had rescued hunters from an infested building and had single-handedly killed at least 80 Urata scorpions. This information shocked Katsuya. He couldn't believe that Akira had taken down 80 or more Urata scorpions alone. Irie then interjected, noting that Katsuya, numbered 52, had also rescued many hunters and had killed a gluttonous crocodile. Reina added that Katsuya's team had indeed killed a gluttonous crocodile, but this only angered HQ, which retorted that they didn't care about some crocodile because 27 had also killed one, solo. HQ's frustration boiled over as they shouted for everyone to stop nitpicking and not question their orders any further. With that, HQ ended the call, leaving Katsuya speechless. Reina noticed Katsuya's stunned expression and realized she had never seen him like this before. She wondered who this boy named Akira was. But still, this is the chance she have to take. In a reckless decision, Reina told Shiori that they would go after Akira. Akira asked Alpha what he should do next, wondering if he should head directly toward checkpoint 15. Alpha questioned why he suggested that. Akira explained that scorpions fleeing from checkpoint 15 might have left a blood trail leading back to their nest. Alpha commended him for this logical deduction and asked for another reason. Akira guessed that if he encountered a swarm on his way, he could retreat to checkpoint 15 for safety. Alpha confirmed that Akira's second reason was especially sound, reinforcing his suspicion that Alpha also doubted checkpoint 14's safety. Alpha elaborated that with no one on high alert and personnel already bickering among themselves, relying on that group would be akin to walking into a death trap. She advised Akira to proceed without her support, as it would serve as valuable training. Akira questioned why Alpha was included in the training, to which Alpha admitted her scouting abilities had significantly diminished. This revelation shocked Akira, prompting him to ask what she meant. Alpha explained that she struggled to detect threats beneath Kuzusahara as effectively as she could on the surface. Akira inquired about the extent of her impairment, but Alpha only described it as a real doozy, and maintained that it was confidential. Though taken aback, Akira had no choice but to move forward. However, Alpha warned him to wait, as they had company. Looking back, Akira saw Reina and Shiori approaching. Akira asked what they wanted. Reina replied that they were coming with him. Akira insisted they should leave and quickened his pace. Despite his efforts, they trailed behind him. Akira then asked what he needed to do to make them leave, suggesting he could shove a gun in Reina's face. Shiori warned Akira that such an action would lead to unnecessary harm for both sides and advised against it. She recommended reconsidering the approach. If Shiori's warning was accurate, Akira told her to drag Reina back to the checkpoint to avoid a headache. Shiori bowed, stating that respecting Miss Reina's wishes was also part of her duty, so she declined. Alpha advised Akira that arguing would only make matters worse and suggested he simply ignore them. Following Alpha's advice, Akira continued alone, scouting cautiously with every step. Miss Reina then asked Shiori why Akira was moving so slowly. Shiori responded that he must be the cautious type. Miss Reina agreed but questioned their snail-paced progress, noting there were 3 of them. Shiori corrected her, saying there was only one, implying that Akira wasn't relying on them at all. Miss Reina wondered if Shiori meant that Akira doubted their capability. Shiori suggested they should turn back, doubting Miss Reina would gain anything by continuing with Akira. Miss Reina, however, refused to give up and remained stubborn. Shiori took note of this and decided to try convincing Akira. Meanwhile, Akira was investigating for signs of Urata scorpions but found none. He speculated that they might be further ahead. At that moment, Shiori approached Akira, attempting to speak with him. When Akira continued to ignore her, Shiori said something that grabbed his attention. She wanted to hire him as Reina's bodyguard, which surprised both Reina and Akira. Shiori explained that Akira would protect Miss Reina during the scorpion extermination, provided he stayed close enough to assist her, and offered to pay him 5 million orum upon successful completion. Miss Reina interrupted, asking what Shiori was talking about. Shiori clarified that she was hiring additional protection for her because Reina refused to turn back and needed to take extra measures for her safety. Alpha advised Akira to speak up or they'd decide for him. Akira stood up and firmly declared he wasn't taking the job. Shiori responded by saying if the pay didn't satisfy him, she was open to negotiation. But that wasn't the issue. Akira admitted he didn't feel skilled enough to earn the pay. He struggled with the idea of guarding someone else. The reason for hiring him as a guard was his impressive feat of saving hunters from a Urata scorpion swarm solo. While true, Akira had barely made it through, burning through all his ammo and surviving by the skin of his teeth. Reina then asked why he had taken on this extermination job if it was so tough. Akira shouted that he would have declined if he could. However, his client was Kugamayama DLS, and he wondered how he was supposed to turn them down, which left Reina stunned. She continued, questioning if he wasn't actually that strong. Akira confirmed her suspicion. Reina had thought he was special since the HQ had specifically requested him, and Katsuya seemed genuinely impressed. Realizing this was a letdown, Reina felt disheartened. With this new information, Shiori revised her offer. She proposed that Akira support Miss Reina until they returned to the checkpoint, offering him 100,000 orum in advance. Reina asked what Shiori was doing. Shiori explained that if Reina listened to her and left, Shiori would withdraw her offer. However, Shiori already knew Reina wouldn't back down. This left Reina in a tough spot. If she went back now, she'd look foolish. Alpha then advised Akira to accept the offer, reasoning that refusing would only spark another argument. She believed the job was essentially an excuse to avoid conflict while they were with him. Alpha's advice had a point, and because of that Akira agreed. Shiori handed Akira the money and introduced herself. Akira then asked what their next move was. This confused Reina, who asked what he meant. Akira explained that since he was being paid to support her, he would go along with her plan. Reina panicked slightly, realizing she didn't have a plan. Shiori suggested they should stick with their current search plan for the time being. Reina immediately agreed, and so did Akira. He resumed scouting the area, while Reina watched him. She wondered if she had overestimated him earlier. If he was indeed a weakling, how had he managed to kill a gluttonous croc on his own? He didn't seem strong at all. Shiori noticed Reina's preoccupation and asked if something was bothering her. Reina, startled, apologized and said it was nothing. Shiori then thought Reina was fixated on Akira's competence, while it was actually her own skills that were concerning her. Although Reina didn't realize it, She was using Akira as a benchmark for herself. Shiori considered that if Reina continued to scrutinize him, it could lead to further disputes. Deciding this wouldn't do, Shiori took the opportunity to approach Akira and asked for his opinion on Miss Reina's skills. Akira questioned why she was asking him. Shiori explained she wanted an outside perspective and considered it part of the assessment aspect of supporting Miss Reina. Akira mentioned he still wasn't sure what to say and sought Alpha's advice. She suggested treating it as training and figuring it out himself. Alpha believed that a hunter needed to gauge someone's competence at first glance. She also thought Akira could use some practice in negotiating amicably and was confident he'd manage it. Akira resolved to give Shiori an answer. He told her that skill was too vague and requested a reference frame. Shiori acknowledged his point and provided a reference. If he were to hire Miss Reina for a hunt, how much would he be willing to pay her? The reference made things clearer for Akira, and he responded that he wouldn't hire her at all, leaving both Shiori and Reina stunned. Reina pondered over this. If Akira wouldn't even hire her for free, just how little did he think of her? Shiori wasn't pleased with Akira's answer either. She pressed him to reconsider or justify his judgment for her own satisfaction. Akira calmly explained that he found her a huge pain. He elaborated that he'd retract his statement if she could realistically handle killing 50 Urata scorpions and everyone else at checkpoint 14 without breaking a sweat. Reina stuttered. She couldn't pretend to be stronger than she was. Akira cut her off, questioning how well she had thought through picking a fight with those two guys earlier. He asked why she had been so aggressive and if she was sure she could handle them if things turned violent. Reina retorted that she couldn't just let them insult her. Akira was indifferent and told her to do whatever she felt was necessary, as long as she could predict the outcomes and deal with the consequences. He added that letting people walk over her might lead to her death. Sometimes, she might need to pull a gun to show she meant business. What she did previously seemed acceptable to Akira, as long as she was willing to deal with the aftermath. He reiterated his question, asking how she had figured her stunt would play out. Shiori interrupted, stating that if the situation had worsened, she would have done her utmost to restore order. She also found Akira's scenario rather unlikely. Akira agreed that Reina could count on Shiori to settle matters, which he considered a decent plan. He apologized, admitting he thought she was asking about only Reina, not both of them. Shiori quickly retracted her earlier statement and questioned how the ability to kill 50 scorpions and the other hunters was relevant to his answer. Akira explained that it was just an estimate. If Reina could handle that, he figured she could manage the checkpoint alone regardless of what happened. Shiori said that was an extreme reference point, but Akira agreed, shocking Shiori. Akira clarified that most people don't need to worry about such worst-case scenarios, but he did. He wouldn't spend his own money hiring someone who picks unnecessary fights. End of story. He reminded them that he wasn't claiming to be the best. If they disagreed, they could forget about it since it was just his opinion. Shiori accepted this, though she didn't agree with his reasons. She then asked him one last thing. Did he consider how much his answers would upset her? Glaring at him, she questioned if he was prepared to fight her to the death. Akira met her glare, readied his rifle, and responded that since she told him that answering was part of his job and he had taken her money, he figured he needed to be honest with his answers, even if it pissed them off. This confirmed Shiori's suspicion. He was prepared to fight her to the death. Both of them readied themselves, prepared to pull the trigger at any moment. Shiori couldn't believe he was serious. Reina intervened, telling Shiori to stop. Feeling despondent, she begged Shiori to quit. This made Shiori feel pity for her. Alpha sighed at how the situation had escalated. Akira immediately said he hadn't started the fight. Although Alpha had advised him to think for himself, not even her processing power could predict the outcome. She teased Akira, saying he didn't have to try so hard to surprise her. Akira apologized. As time passed, what had happened made things awkward for everyone, and Reina remained silent, feeling bad about what Akira had said earlier. Akira noticed Reina's discomfort and wondered if it was too late to ask if making them happy was part of his job. Should he have told a little white lie? Alpha agreed that if avoiding conflict was his priority, a white lie might have been useful. But commitment to doing his job well was even more important. As one of his clients, she approved of his stance. Akira then spotted something in the shadows. He approached it cautiously with his rifle ready. Alpha identified it as a dead Urata scorpion. Akira asked if it wasn't faking and noticed that the scorpions he had fought above ground were much smaller than this one. He thought that if the others had left a trail, they could follow it to their nest. Alpha pointed out that a large swarm of scorpions had passed through that area. Reina noticed Akira moving away from checkpoint 15, which puzzled them since her sensors didn't detect anything in that direction. As they followed Akira, they found a large hole in the wall. What was inside shocked them the most. Cheryl kicked off a new business venture, dragging Katsuragi into her scheme with her winning business plan. She'd invested the million Aurum from selling part of their turf as seed money. With several suppliers on board, she was all set. Today was the big launch. Akira had splurged a million Aurum to settle with Shijima, so Cheryl planned to repay him with interest. Operation Hot Sandwich Stand was officially a go. Ario noticed that Aricia smelled fantastic, thanks to some fancy soap the boss had recommended. Aricia, now revitalized and barely recognizing her own reflection, was embarrassed but grateful. She wondered why the boss wanted them looking so fabulous. Suddenly, Cheryl appeared, freshly cleaned up and on a mission. She yanked them to the wasteland, declaring, "Let's make them buy." Cheryl rallied her team, explaining that their new base in the wasteland was the perfect spot to attract customers. She proudly announced they would be selling hot sandwiches. This was the real reason she made them clean up and flash their best smiles. The sandwiches were priced at a whopping 980 Aurum each. Ario raised an eyebrow, wondering who in the wasteland would pay that much for a sandwich. But Cheryl was confident they'd succeed, and her team had no choice but to roll with it. Ario, who was on a skipping meals diet, was practically drooling as he clutched a sandwich. Cheryl motivated him with the promise of a gourmet experience. When he got the go-ahead, he devoured the sandwich like a starved wolf, munching, chomping, and moaning in delight. The other hunters nearby were stunned, and before long, they were clamoring for their own sandwiches. The operation was a runaway hit. Cheryl, ever the innovator, started decorating the sandwiches with sauce for fun, which customers seemed to love. It was like sandwich art. Each one was a masterpiece. Ario found the whole thing a bit surreal but couldn't deny the success. As Cheryl basked in her sandwich empire's glory, she daydreamed about Akira being awestruck by her success. In her fantasy, he was blown away by her earning 1.5 million orum and enveloped her in a bear hug of gratitude. Meanwhile, Ario and Arisia peeked into Cheryl's room and caught her hugging an imaginary Akira. Standing by a mysterious, gaping hole not marked on his map, Akira reported to headquarters that he had discovered a large cavity. He speculated that this might be where the scorpions that had overrun Checkpoint 15 originated. Reina was taken aback by the revelation. She hadn't expected Akira to divert his search to this spot, and she wondered how he had known to check here. Headquarters responded that they had a visual on the hole Akira was referring to and explained that it led to an area they hadn't cleared yet. They warned him that there were likely multiple scorpion nests inside. Akira agreed with this assessment but decided that his search was complete, indicating he would return to Checkpoint 14. However, HQ insisted he stay put, explaining that they needed to establish a new checkpoint beyond the hole. They instructed him to hold the position until additional personnel arrived. Akira protested, arguing that it was unreasonable to expect him to fend off the monsters alone. HQ countered that, as security, temporarily holding positions was part of his job. With little choice, Akira begrudgingly agreed, sitting down on the ground as Reina and Shiori watched him. Shiori reflected on the earlier events and regretted underestimating Akira's competence. She had assumed he would back down under her intimidation, and she was left pondering what might have happened if Reina hadn't intervened. This led her to some serious self-reflection. Reina was also troubled by Akira's words. She questioned whether she had fully considered the consequences of her actions and the potential violence she had instigated. Akira's words made her question her own decisions, and she couldn't fault him for his stance. Shiori approached Reina, telling her not to dwell too much on what happened earlier since she was equally at fault. Reina then remembered she hadn't properly thanked Shiori lately and apologized for the trouble she had caused. She expressed her gratitude for Shiori's intervention and asked if she could count on her help in the future. Shiori was taken aback by Reina's sudden change of attitude. She immediately assured Reina that she could depend on her. The heartfelt apology made Shiori blush with happiness. Meanwhile, Akira pointed his rifle into the big hole, catching Reina and Shiori's attention as he aimed menacingly inside. He asked Alpha how many creatures were in the hole. Alpha informed him that 124 scorpions were within scanner range and more were approaching. Akira was bemused by his consistent run of bad luck, feeling like he always drew the short straw. Alpha advised him to get used to it and stay calm. Akira agreed and prepared for action. Reina then asked if Akira's scanner detected any threats. He assured her he would handle the hole and instructed Reina and Shiori to monitor the passage. Shiori launched flares, asking Reina to report what she saw as the flares illuminated the dark, cold room. As the light from the flares faded, the situation seemed quiet, but Alpha quickly alerted Akira to the approaching threat. Large numbers of Urata scorpions were crawling toward them. Alpha began a countdown, and as it reached 0, Akira fired his rifle. The shot was devastating, cutting through the scorpions with precision and power, the bullets piercing through them in a single volley. Akira was impressed by the ammo's effectiveness, even if it was costly. Alpha informed him that it was fortunate that the ammo was effective at long range as well. She advised him to use it freely and eliminate as many scorpions as possible. As Akira fired those hard-hitting rounds, Reina was in awe. Every shot he took sent his entire body reeling backward, yet his stance remained rock solid. Even more impressive, his aim never wavered. It was like watching a kid fire a .50 caliber rifle with no tripod, and not flinch. Reina couldn't believe what she was seeing. She had no idea Akira was capable of such a feat. She asked why on earth he'd bring something as powerful as the CWH proprietary cartridges down into the hole. Akira explained that he had to pack the best ammo he could get, but Reina didn't quite understand. That type of expensive ammunition seemed wasted on Urata scorpions. How could he turn a profit with that kind of overhead? Akira revealed that his client footed the bill for the ammo. He had included it as a condition for accepting the job, thinking it might get him out of this mess early. Reina was stunned. She couldn't believe his client agreed to cover such expensive cartridges. Akira further explained that he wouldn't have been there at all if they hadn't. Now that he thought about it, his client must have known he'd end up in this kind of situation. Shiori suddenly noticed something. Another group of Urata scorpions. She quickly dispatched them, which shocked Reina. Where had they come from? Reina wondered aloud if there were more holes. Shiori simply told her to get ready. Akira chimed in, saying that these scorpions must belong to a different group from the ones that had attacked Checkpoint 15. Now, They were just returning home. With his hands full, Akira shouted for them to figure something out. Despite her lack of confidence, Reina promised she'd come up with a solution. Akira, clearly desperate, told her he was counting on her. He emphasized that he meant it. He really needed her to make this work. Reina was taken aback, but those words bolstered her confidence. As she readied her rifle, she began to feel more capable. As she fired at the Urata scorpions from the sides, she realized how crucial her support was. Akira may have been an incredible fighter, but even he knew when to ask for backup. With her newfound confidence, taking out those scorpions became a piece of cake. Shiori noticed this sudden transformation. She never imagined Miss Reina could fight so well. Maybe Shiori had underestimated her all along, but she still wondered what had caused Reina to bloom so suddenly. As the battle raged on, hundreds of Urata scorpions lay dead on the ground. Alpha informed Akira that he had wiped out every enemy within scanning range and praised him for a job well done. Akira immediately contacted HQ, demanding to know where the reinforcements were, as he hadn't seen any yet. HQ responded that they had already been dispatched to his position and asked if they hadn't arrived. Frustrated, Akira shouted that they were nowhere to be found and told HQ to hurry up. Exhausted, Akira plopped down onto the ground, lamenting the small fortune he had just spent on proprietary ammo. He nervously asked Alpha if the client was going to demand reimbursement later. He was starting to feel like he might be getting scammed. Alpha reassured him, saying he would be fine. She thought. Akira panicked, asking if she wasn't sure. Alpha cheekily responded that since she didn't work for the city, how could she be certain? She teased him, saying, "What if the city doesn't pay us?" Sweat dripped from Akira's brow as he begged Alpha to tell him he had nothing to worry about. Meanwhile, inside the massive hole, Reina and Shiori surveyed the area. With hundreds of dead Urata scorpions scattered around, Reina could barely hide her disgust. Shiori noticed and offered to investigate the hole alone, suggesting that Reina wait outside. But Reina, gritting her teeth, stammered that she was fine and insisted on helping Shiori out. Despite her disgust, Reina knew that if she wanted to be a hunter, she had to get used to situations like this. Her determination and resolve pleased Shiori. Meanwhile, Akira wandered the hallway, looking at the piles of Urata scorpion corpses. He couldn't believe they had swarmed the entire corridor like that. It had been a closer call than he'd thought. Without Reina and Shiori's help, he might have been toast. Alpha chimed in, reminding him that every scorpion was killed before getting anywhere near him. This only confirmed how skilled Reina and Shiori were. Akira asked if he could have handled it without their help, but Alpha reassured him that, with her full support, he probably could have pulled it off. That didn't seem to make him feel much better, though. He sighed, realizing this whole job was way out of his league. It was clear now, he'd bitten off more than he could chew. After a while, Katsuya and his team, along with other hunters, finally arrived. Alpha mentioned that his backup had shown up. Better late than never. Akira then approached Shiori to discuss his job. While things hadn't gone exactly as planned, he asked if his part was done now. Shiori bowed slightly, thanked him for his work, and agreed that his job was complete. Reina called out to Akira, but he simply ignored her and walked off. Katsuya's team noticed and raised an eyebrow as they watched him leave. Akira reported back to HQ, who informed him they had reviewed his combat logs but had a few questions. Akira immediately cut them off, shouting that he wasn't paying for the ammo. To his relief, HQ said that wasn't the issue. If his results didn't match his expenses, they'd just terminate his contract instead of billing him. That didn't sound particularly comforting either, but at least he wasn't getting scammed on ammo costs. As for his bonus, HQ said they couldn't precisely count how many scorpions he'd taken down in the chaos. So, they had decided to calculate his pay based on an estimate of his team's total kill count. They asked how he wanted to handle this. Akira, not wanting any nonsense, told them to tally up whatever they wanted, mashed scorpions included, and divide the total by 3. HQ, surprised by his suggestion, asked if he was sure. Akira fired back, asking if there was a problem with that. HQ reassured him there was no issue. They just wanted to double check. With that settled, they agreed to divide the kill count by 3, and warned him not to complain about it later. With that, they ended the call. Later, Reina, Shiori, and Katsuya's team approached Akira. Reina mentioned that HQ had just explained how the payment would work. They told her that each person would get credit for a third of the kills, and she asked Akira if that was right. Akira confirmed it was true since it's what he had told HQ. Reina stared at him in silence. Akira, catching on, decided to get ahead of things. He told her that if she was trying to claim all the credit because he had been hired to support her, there was no way he'd agree to that. But Reina surprised him by saying it was actually the opposite. This confused Akira, as he wasn't sure what she meant by the opposite. Reina explained that since Akira had taken out most of the swarm by himself, she was wondering if he was really okay with splitting the pay equally. Akira admitted that while it was true he had killed more, it still made sense to divide it evenly. The 3 of them had been responsible for the kills, after all, and besides, his client was covering his ammo costs, which was a bonus for him. In the end, even though he had handled the bulk of the fighting, Reina had watched his back the whole time. Everyone had their own roles to play, and they each did their job. That's all that really mattered. Akira asked if Reina had any issues with the arrangement. While she didn't necessarily have a problem, she still felt that splitting everything 3 ways didn't sit right with her. Before things could escalate, Shiori stepped in, reminding Reina that they hadn't lost anything in the process. Since Akira was satisfied with the outcome, Shiori suggested dropping the matter. After all, arguing over nothing could lead to unnecessary conflict. Reina realized the sense in Shiori's words and agreed, while Akira nodded in approval, also not wanting to drag things out any further. Akira then turned to Shiori, asking if there was anything else she needed from him. Shiori confirmed there was nothing more and thanked him for his time. Reina looked at Akira, clearly wanting to say more, but unable to find the resolve to speak up. Something was holding her back. Katsuya, having noticed Reina's odd behavior since earlier, decided to step in. He approached Akira and politely asked about the support job he'd mentioned earlier. Without missing a beat, Akira told him to ask Reina about it himself. His bluntness caught Katsuya and his team off guard. Katsuya, trying to remain civil, explained that since he was part of the team, he wanted to understand what had happened while they were separated. But Akira wasn't interested in entertaining the conversation. He repeated that Katsuya should ask Reina or Shiori instead, not him. This response visibly irritated Katsuya. Katsuya pressed further, asking if there was a reason Akira couldn't just tell him directly or if there was something he was hiding. Akira shot him a glare and repeated once again that Katsuya should ask them and not him, shutting down the conversation entirely. The atmosphere grew tense as Akira and Katsuya locked eyes, each refusing to back down. Katsuya suspected something had happened between Akira, Reina, and Shiori. Akira's reasoning was simple. He and Shiori had almost killed each other, so it was better to leave it to Reina and Shiori to decide whether they wanted to share the details. He didn't feel it was his place to explain anything. Yumina, observing the tension between the two, knew she had to step in before things got out of hand. But Katsuya's concern for Reina made it difficult to come up with the right thing to say to defuse the situation. With a quick, somewhat rushed plan, Yumina stepped between them, telling Katsuya it was time to go. While looking down at Akira, she remarked that Katsuya shouldn't waste his time on someone like him. Katsuya was surprised at her boldness. Yumina explained that they still didn't know Akira well enough, and blindly trusting his words could easily lead to misunderstandings. Katsuya saw her point but still couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Akira's behavior seemed suspicious, but Yumina reminded him that it would be quicker and more reliable to ask their teammates directly. Irie also joined in, backing up Yumina's suggestion. With 2 against 1, Katsuya reluctantly agreed to leave. As Yumina turned back to Akira, who was already walking away, she suddenly bowed sincerely toward him. Akira noticed, but by the time he turned back, she had already rushed off to rejoin her teammates. Alpha commented that Yumina had handled the situation perfectly, saving them from any more unnecessary trouble. Akira agreed, feeling relieved that things hadn't escalated. But the gesture puzzled him. Why had she bowed? Had she used that tone deliberately to stop them from fighting? Reflecting on it, Akira wondered if simply saying, "Nothing much," might have avoided all this pointless tension. Alpha cut into his thoughts, reminding him that he had been down there for 8 hours, and his shirt was now covered in grime. She suggested he contact HQ. This lifted Akira's spirits, and he quickly reached out to HQ. Alpha then praised him for surviving another day, noting that with 1 day down, he only had 6 more to go. She encouraged him to keep it up. The next day, Akira returned for the Urata Scorpion's extermination job. He thought about how he had run out of special CWH ammo yesterday but felt confident that what he had brought today would be enough. The staff who had looked down on him the previous day, identified by their badge number, 27, were waiting for him. They asked what he wanted, reconnaissance or extermination. Akira was confused. Why couldn't he pick security? He would rather do the same job as yesterday. But the staff explained that, after his work yesterday, they decided Akira was too skilled to waste on checkpoint duty. He should be pleased to have impressed someone. Akira could only wish they were impressed by his ability to guard a checkpoint, but the staff didn't care. They told him to make a choice. Alpha then explained that reconnaissance would allow Akira to avoid combat if he scouted well enough, while the extermination team would mean heading into battle with plenty of firepower. If he wanted more predictable work and safety in numbers, extermination was the way to go. Surprisingly, Akira chose reconnaissance. The staff directed him to checkpoint 19 to receive his orders. As Akira walked away, the staff couldn't help but mutter, "Recommended by Kibayashi, munitions reimbursement approved by Kibayashi, placement supervisor." Kibayashi. It had to be that Kibayashi, the one notorious for reckless stunts. The staff couldn't decide whether to envy or pity Akira. Back with Akira, Alpha asked why he chose reconnaissance when extermination seemed like the safer bet to avoid situations like Akira explained that, if he picked extermination, he'd have to fight creatures that required a ton of CWH ammo to take down, and he wasn't too keen on that. Alpha gave him a curious look, prompting Akira to ask what was on her mind. He clarified that dying wouldn't help either of them. Alpha noted that proprietary ammunition was expensive, but buying it in bulk from Shizuka could boost her profits. However, Alpha also predicted that the more Akira bought, the more Shizuka would worry about him. This, in turn, hinted that Akira cared about Shizuka. Alpha asked if she was wrong. Akira's silence spoke volumes, and Alpha smirked knowingly. Silence, after all, often means yes. She didn't have an issue with his decision but suggested that, if he wanted to stop Shizuka from worrying, he should hurry up and improve his skills. Akira agreed. Akira arrived at checkpoint 19, where one of the staff immediately recognized him as 27. The staff mentioned that Akira's recon team was out scouting, so he should keep himself busy. Akira agreed, glancing around, noting that the place was packed with people. Alpha chimed in, suggesting that the checkpoint served as a makeshift base for hunters heading into uncharted territory. As Akira looked around, he spotted Katsuya and his group, along with Reina and Shiori. He figured they had been posted there too, which Alpha confirmed. She quickly advised Akira to avoid interacting with them, predicting a fight if he got too close. Akira reluctantly agreed, knowing Alpha had a point. He wasn't in the mood for unnecessary arguments. After a while, Sarah called out to Akira. He acknowledged her, remarking that it had been a while since they last met. He asked if she and Elena were working jobs down here too. Sarah confirmed and added that she hadn't expected Akira to be the newest member of their team. Akira blinked in confusion. If she said it like that, then the recon team he was joining was. Before he could finish the thought, Sarah signaled for him to follow her. When they reached the group, Elena waved at him, confirming his suspicions. He was now part of Recon Team 9, with Elena as the leader. Akira sarcastically introduced himself, trying to hide his surprise, and said it was a pleasure to work with her today, which earned a shared laugh between them. He then noticed that Elena was wearing the power suit he had seen at Shizuka's store, causing him a bit of embarrassment. Elena welcomed him to the team and reminded him to play it safe if things got dangerous. She noted that Shizuka would be heartbroken if anything happened to him. Akira nodded, appreciating the sentiment, and thanked her in advance. Curious, he asked how many people were on the team. Elena answered that, including him, there were 4 members. Akira was surprised at how small the group was. Sarah explained that they originally planned to have a larger team, but the other members couldn't get along. Just then, a voice behind Akira chimed in, apologizing for the situation. The man said he'd be sure to give HR a piece of his mind. The man introduced himself as Shikarabe, part of Recon Team 9, and asked if Akira was the new member. Akira confirmed, introducing himself. Shikarabe seemed happy to have an extra hand but warned that he didn't need any dead weight. He asked Akira if he could pull his own weight. Akira, unfazed, told Shikarabe that HQ sent him, so if he wasn't good enough, Shikarabe could take it up with them. Shikarabe leaned in with a smirk, commenting that Akira didn't sound too confident. He asked if Akira was afraid he didn't have what it took. Akira, without hesitation, admitted that he wasn't skilled enough to guarantee he could handle every situation or always keep the team safe. He acknowledged Shikarabe's point and said he wasn't entirely sure himself. Shikarabe smiled at this and apologized, explaining that he had worked with too many overconfident idiots. At least Akira wasn't one of them, which was a relief. Although Shikarabe doubted Akira was particularly strong, he knew HQ wouldn't send someone who couldn't handle the job. He then asked how long until they'd head out. Elena replied that they'd leave in 5 minutes after she finished transferring data from their last trip. She checked with Akira if the plan worked for him, and Akira confirmed he was ready to go anytime. Alpha suddenly called Akira's attention, confusing him. He glanced in the direction Alpha indicated and saw Katsuya's group, including Reina and Shiori. Shikarabe glared at them while Elena and Sarah sighed. Alpha reminded Akira not to pick any fights. Akira reassured her he wouldn't, doubting that Katsuya would try anything with Elena and Sarah nearby. Elena then asked Shikarabe if she could count on him to handle disputes with other Druncam hunters. Shikarabe agreed and said if there was any trouble, they could send it his way. Sarah whispered to Akira, explaining that when Elena said their team members didn't get along, she was referring to Shikarabe's refusal to work with Katsuya's group. Katsuya suddenly shouted that enough was enough, reminding Shikarabe that he was no longer under his command. He asked if Shikarabe realized how many problems he was causing for Elena and Sarah. Shikarabe cut him off, telling him to shut up and get it through his thick skull that having them around would be worse, and ordered them to leave. Katsuya argued that they couldn't scout such a dangerous area with just 3 people and urged Shikarabe to drop his pride for the sake of their safety. Shikarabe scoffed, informing Katsuya that HQ had found them another member, Akira. He introduced Akira as the guy who fought off a whole swarm the previous day and got HQ's seal of approval. Katsuya glared at Akira, seeing him as an obstacle once again. Katsuya argued that Akira wasn't part of Druncam, but Shikarabe dismissed the complaint, not caring about the affiliation. This enraged Katsuya, who believed Shikarabe should prioritize fellow Druncam hunters when reinforcements were needed. Yumina, meanwhile, was pulling on Katsuya's arm, trying to de-escalate the situation. Shikarabe calmly told Katsuya that he wasn't interested in lugging around dead weight or splitting his pay with them. He added that he didn't blame Katsuya for thinking that way, given his previous experiences. Suddenly, Shikarabe's demeanor changed, and his presence became more intimidating, scaring Yumina. He acknowledged that while Katsuya was a full-fledged hunter now, that didn't make him his equal. He told Katsuya to know his place and back off, clearly asserting dominance. Akira continued to glare at Katsuya, warning him that if he kept getting in his way, he'd consider him an enemy and respond accordingly. Katsuya can only glare, unable to do anything. Before the argument escalated, Elena announced it was time to go. Katsuya could only watch as they left, gritting his teeth. Reina asked Shiori if that's how she acted the day before, and Shiori apologized, saying she might have been even worse. As they continued their scout, a group of Urata scorpions caught their attention, leaving them no choice but to fight. The commotion only attracted more scorpions, forcing them into an extended battle. Alpha, noticing Akira's growing exhaustion, decided it was time to intervene. She thought it might make good training for him, but acknowledged he couldn't handle everything alone just yet. Alpha then cancelled his scouting practice, offering to scan for threats so he could relax a little. Akira was relieved, admitting he couldn't take any more, and thanked her. Shikarabe asked Akira what was happening to his right. Akira replied that there were 3 Urata scorpions about 50 meters away. Since they weren't moving, he guessed they were dead. Even if they were faking, they weren't in the team's path, so they could be ignored. Elena confirmed Akira's assessment was correct, earning him thanks from Shikarabe. Shikarabe, impressed, apologized for doubting him. He thought Akira had started slacking off. Shikarabe muttered that he might be getting rusty, but Akira knew that he's wrong and his instinct is razor sharp. Confused by Shikarabe's sudden change in attitude, asked Alpha how he had figured it out. Alpha explained that Shikarabe's 5 senses and scanner had detected subtle changes in Akira's movements, so he suspected Akira might have been distracted. Since Shikarabe couldn't fully explain it, he chalked it up to instinct. Akira was surprised, but Alpha told him he'd need to develop that same instinct eventually, so he'd better keep working on it. Shikarabe then made a comment that they had added Akira for firepower, but he was proving to be a good scout too, a real jackpot. He even smiled, happy that they had ditched Katsuya for him. However, Elena wasn't as thrilled, wishing that Shikarabe wouldn't drag them into his syndicate's internal disputes. Shikarabe reminded her that she had agreed with his concerns, and Elena caught Akira staring at her as Shikarabe said it. She sighed, admitting that while Katsuya and his team were competent, she couldn't trust them to follow orders in an emergency. Now that Akira knew the situation, Elena made it clear she expected him to follow her orders when the time came. She promised to give clear instructions and explain her reasoning if needed. Akira reassured her, promising to do as he was told, which pleased both Elena and Sarah. As they moved forward, Shikarabe mentioned that cave-ins had blocked a lot of the passages, making the area feel like a maze. He then suggested Akira take point for a while. His reason was simple. He wanted to see how well Akira could fight before they encountered real trouble. Akira didn't mind, but left the final decision to Elena. After a moment of thought, Elena agreed and told Shikarabe to switch places with Akira. She instructed Akira not to do anything reckless, to which he immediately replied that he wouldn't. Elena then told Sarah and Shikarabe to back him up as soon as they thought he was in danger, which they both agreed to. Alpha then asked Akira how much support he wanted her to provide. Akira, not quite understanding, asked for her full assistance. Alpha suggested that if they held back a little now, it might improve his chances of being assigned to security next time. However, this strategy wouldn't be fair to Elena and Sarah. Understanding the situation, Akira requested Alpha's full support, as he didn't want to let his team down. Alpha, already expecting that response, was sure Akira wouldn't disappoint her. As they moved forward, Alpha informed Akira that there were 4 Urata scorpions ahead and advised him to take them out before the creatures noticed them. Following her advice, Akira quickly fired at the targets. Shikarabe raised an eyebrow, impressed by how Akira managed to detect the scorpions at such a distance, assuming he must have a high-end scanner. Elena nodded along, but in truth, she knew the scanner she sold him shouldn't have been capable of detecting enemies from that far away. It made her wonder how he was pulling it off. Was it because he was an old domain user? Curious, she subtly used her contact lens display to scan Akira, trying to pick up any clues. Elena had heard stories of users who could tap into ancient wireless networks to map out and locate ruins. Could Akira be doing something similar? She was intrigued but couldn't just ask him outright. As they continued, they came across a set of stairs leading down to another level. Akira was caught off guard by the sheer number of relics scattered around. Sarah, noticing his reaction, could relate, but she reminded him that taking any of the relics would violate their contract. She also warned him that sneaking a few wouldn't work, speaking from what sounded like personal experience. Elena backed her up, explaining that the fines would be so steep it would take 3 lifetimes to pay them off. Better to just leave the relics where they were. Akira reassured them that they didn't have to worry. He wasn't planning on taking anything. Shikarabe chimed in, adding that anyone who didn't want the city authorities carting off these relics just had to make it down there themselves. He mused aloud that while that might be wishful thinking, it wasn't impossible. Elena shot Shikarabe a look for his comment, and he quickly clarified that he wasn't thinking of stealing anything. He was simply reminded of a rumor from a while back about a seemingly normal kid who brought high-value relics to an exchange. People speculated that there must be an unexplored zone near the city, and a lot of hunters had gone looking for it. Shikarabe asked if the others had heard about it. He suggested that maybe the kid had found relics in an underground store, possibly stumbling upon an entrance while escaping a monster. It wasn't such a far-fetched idea. Elena, however, responded with a frosty tone, telling him he better not be considering smuggling anything out of the ruins. Shikarabe quickly backpedaled, insisting he was just speculating, not plotting a heist. Then, with a smirk, he asked why Elena seemed so uptight about the whole thing. Elena brushed it off, saying they had gone on that wild goose chase too. That was all. Shikarabe, sensing the tension, apologized and asked Akira if he had been part of the same hunt. Akira confirmed that he had. Shikarabe figured something must have gone horribly wrong to make the subject so touchy. For Sarah, some of it had been terrible, but it wasn't all bad. In hindsight, she was glad they went on that expedition. As she spoke, she gazed at the bullet necklace she wore, a memento from that adventure. Back then, she couldn't have said the same, but now, with time to reflect, that's how she felt. She then asked Elena what she thought. Elena took a moment, weighing her thoughts, before admitting that, yes, she was glad they went too. Turning to Akira, Sarah asked for his opinion, adding that she felt like her luck had improved ever since that trip. Elena quickly agreed with her. Shikarabe, now curious, asked Akira how he felt about it. After thinking for a moment, Akira smiled and said he was glad he went too. That was the final straw for Shikarabe, who couldn't help but feel frustrated. He was the only one who seemed to have gained nothing from that adventure. Instead, he had been stuck babysitting a bunch of rookies Druncam had assigned him to, and cleaning up after their messes was a nightmare. Just thinking about it made him fume all over again. Frustrated, Shikarabe told Akira he'd take point, planning to vent his annoyance on the monsters ahead. As they advanced, the team fought through more and more Urata scorpions. Thanks to their tight teamwork and coordination, they managed to fend off the swarms without suffering any casualties. But Shikarabe couldn't help but notice that the hordes were getting bigger and bigger. Curious, he asked Elena if they were nearing a major nest. This prompted Elena to suggest turning back for now. They had already collected plenty of terrain data, and they were about to hit their minimum expedition time anyway. It was a sound decision, and the group quickly agreed. As they made their way back, Elena took a good look around, something gnawing at her. Akira asked if something was wrong, to which Elena pointed out that the passage ahead was blocked by debris, likely from a cave-in. Sarah suggested they just turn around, but Elena hesitated. This wasn't their first detour. They had already taken 3. The idea that another recon team might have set off explosives during a fight, possibly causing the cave-in, crossed their minds. The last thing anyone wanted was to be buried alive. Shikarabe agreed it was a good call to turn back early, especially while they still had plenty of ammo and energy reserves. He suggested they find a new route while they could. Elena nodded and urged the group to move quickly. Just then, Alpha chimed in, telling Akira to stop the others and advise them to take the shortest route possible. When Elena gave the order to proceed, Akira asked if he could have a word. Elena, curious, asked what was up. Akira explained that he wanted to check the rubble blocking the shortest route to checkpoint 19. He mentioned that the blockage hadn't been there earlier and that they needed to investigate it quickly. The entire group stared at Akira, puzzled as to why he would even suggest such a thing. Shikarabe, in particular, was taken aback when Elena surprisingly agreed to Akira's plan. She guessed it was urgent, and Akira confirmed her suspicion. Elena took the lead, but Shikarabe was still having a hard time accepting the situation. He needed an explanation, at least a reason why they were taking this detour. Elena, however, told him she'd explain later and reminded him that since he promised to follow her orders, he should either shut up or stay behind. With no other option, Shikarabe reluctantly followed, hoping he'd get some clarity soon. As they approached the shortest route, Alpha advised Akira to switch to his C.W.H. gear and mentioned he'd be glad his client was still paying for his ammo. Without hesitation, Akira dashed ahead with his C.W.H. in hand, asking Alpha if her hunch was correct. She confirmed it was. Sliding into position, Akira readied his rifle, aiming at the supposed debris blocking their path. Elena, confused, asked what he was doing. Akira shouted back that it wasn't just debris and fired. Instead of the rocks crumbling, the target started to bleed. Everyone was momentarily stunned. It turned out the Urata scorpions had disguised themselves as debris. The scorpions lunged at Akira, catching him off guard, but his teammates quickly reacted, drawing their weapons and providing backup. Working together, they fought off the scorpions, dispatching them with relative ease. After the fight, Akira turned to Elena and insisted they needed to hurry back to checkpoint 19, or at least get close enough to make contact. At worst, they could already be surrounded, and Akira wanted to break through before the scorpions dug in for a full assault. Elena agreed and instructed Sarah and Shikarabe to take the point. She explained that they should expect Urata scorpions to be lurking everywhere due to the significant changes in the terrain. They were tasked with dispersing any scorpions they encountered while Elena and Akira would match their pace but keep moving quickly. Elena told Akira he would guard the rear and urged them to get moving. Sarah reminded Akira to keep a watchful eye on their backs, while Shikarabe mused that this task was definitely better than searching for an exit. As they proceeded, a swarm of Urata scorpions emerged, just as they had anticipated. Elena instructed Sarah to look up. As Sarah glanced skyward, a fresh wave of Urata scorpions lunged at them. Without hesitation, Sarah aimed her machine gun upwards and fired, showing off her remarkable ability to manage recoil. Elena then alerted Shikarabe to a new swarm of scorpions in front of him. He fired at the incoming threat, expecting another swarm, but was instead met by a massive Urata scorpion charging toward him. Shikarabe fought back, firing at the monster, but it kept closing in. In a last-ditch effort, Shikarabe kicked the giant scorpion, causing it to crash into a nearby swarm. This unexpected move left Akira amazed. Alpha reminded him to stop gawking and contribute. Akira felt a strange sense of déjà vu, as if he had faced a similar situation just yesterday. Alpha noted that if he recognized the pattern, he should already know how to handle it, adding that, unlike yesterday, retreat was an option. Though the passage was slightly wider, Akira questioned whether that made things easier or harder and urged Alpha to decide quickly. Alpha assured him that there wasn't much difference, meaning he could come out on top as he had before. Akira smiled, pleased to hear that, and Shikarabe noticed his grin. Impressed by Akira's capabilities, Shikarabe wondered why his instincts still told him Akira was nothing special. He considered that his experiences with Katsuya's team might have made him less impressed with younger hunters. If that was the case, he'd need to keep an eye on Akira. Elena then tried to contact Checkpoint 19, which responded and inquired about their status. Elena confirmed they were on their way back and reported they had just fought a large swarm of scorpions, which likely came from a major nest. She advised them to be cautious in case the scorpions followed. Checkpoint 19 acknowledged the warning, and with that, Elena told the team they were clear to relax and head back at their own pace. With her reassurance, they safely made it back to Checkpoint 19. Back at the checkpoint, Akira explained to Shikarabe that he had previously encountered scorpions disguised as rubble and suspected this might be what blocked the tunnel. Then Shikarabe asked what if he got it wrong, to which Akira answered that he'd have been relieved they had one less thing to worry about. But if that happened, the others would think less of him, which Akira knew already and apologized. But if he lets him down, he can always complain to HQ and have him replaced. Shikarabe then asked if that was really his only reason. He just wanted to make sure and didn't care if he's wrong. That's not how Akira looks to Shikarabe. But Akira doesn't know what to tell him, as he only followed his own instinct. If he puts it like that, Shikarabe can't argue with that. But well, he was right, so who cares? Shikarabe then apologized to Elena and asked if it's alright to clock out now since he still had a report to write. Elena agreed to his request and bid farewell to him. As Shikarabe walked away, Shiori called him out, wishing to ask something and asking to have a few moments of his time. Shikarabe glanced at Shiori, who had Reina and Katsuya's team with her. He told her to make it quick, as he was busier than he looked. Shiori assured him she'd be brief and asked for his opinion on Mr. Akira. Shikarabe inquired if she hoped he'd say he preferred Katsuya's team instead. Shiori admitted, somewhat embarrassed, that she had made a mistake by arguing with Mr. Akira the previous day. To avoid a repeat of her blunder, she wanted an accurate assessment of his abilities. Shikarabe advised her to avoid doing anything foolish, and she wouldn't have to worry. However, Shiori revealed that she had underestimated Akira's capabilities, which piqued Shikarabe's interest. He told her that while Akira wasn't on his level, he managed to pull his weight. That was his take after observing Akira in action and asked if that was sufficient for Shiori. Shiori said that a variety of circumstances led Shikarabe to take Mr. Akira with him rather than Mr. Katsuya. If he were to judge purely based on their individual competency, would he have made a different decision? Shiori asked. Shikarabe told her that his instincts tell him that Katsuya is stronger, and he'll admit he's skilled. If there's nothing else, he doesn't want her making too much of his answer, so he'll leave it at that. Shiori then bowed slightly and thanked him. Shikarabe then looks at Katsuya. His instincts are still telling him that Katsuya is stronger than Akira, but could Katsuya have done what he did out there? As Shiori returned to her team, Reina asked what she had discussed with Shikarabe. Shiori explained that she had asked a few questions about Mr. Akira, who had taken their place on the recon team. Apparently, Akira had performed adequately without hindering his teammates. Katsuya then inquired if Shikarabe had said anything else. Shiori relayed Shikarabe's remarks. My instincts tell me Katsuya is stronger, and he's skilled, if nothing else. Shiori agreed with this assessment. Katsuya was pleased and thanked her, which Reina noted. If Katsuya was stronger than Akira, he must be impressive. Katsuya was somewhat embarrassed by this. Shiori, meanwhile, watched Akira talking with Elena and Sarah. Elena was astonished that Akira found the reconnaissance challenging since he made it look effortless. Akira disagreed, explaining that he was barely managing and wasn't ready for recon yet. Elena and Sarah exchanged glances. Elena then sarcastically suggested that as the leader of Recon Team 9, she could report Akira as ineffective, which might get him reassigned to security. To her surprise, Akira eagerly agreed, stunning both Elena and Sarah. Elena asked if he was certain, noting that he could earn more working in reconnaissance or extermination, which would also look better on his resume. Akira shrugged, saying he didn't mind. Elena was astonished, as most people would want a better report than they deserved. Akira must have been quite an anomaly. Akira, in turn, was surprised, suggesting that many people must have a death wish, including Elena and Sarah, which made things a bit awkward. With that, they said their goodbyes and departed. On the third day of Urata Scorpion extermination, the scene shifted back to the underground, where many hunters were preparing for the ongoing battle. Alpha informed Akira that he had landed the security job he wanted. Akira replied that Elena must have come through for him. As he looked around, Akira found it surprising that so many hunters were involved in setting up new lighting. Alpha explained that the lights also functioned as scanners. If the scorpions tunneled through a wall again, the lights would detect them. She further explained that relics discovered deeper in the tunnels had proven surprisingly valuable, which was why the city had become serious about retrieving them. Understanding this, Akira carried one of the lights and felt reassured that installing them would ensure safety, so he had nothing to worry about. While installing one of the lights, Akira sighed. He then asked Alpha about the other hunters who were supposed to join him. To his surprise, Alpha warned him to stay alert. Immediately, Akira asked if something was wrong. Alpha pointed to a section of the tunnel where the lights had not yet been installed and indicated a suspicious armed individual in that direction. Akira questioned what was unusual about another hunter being down there since everyone carried guns. Alpha explained that their terminals tracked each other's locations, which Akira already knew. He asked what the issue was. Alpha replied that the person in question was not transmitting any data. Their terminal might be broken, disabled deliberately, or they might not have a terminal at all. She asked Akira if he was willing to bet it was just a malfunction. Akira wondered if the individual wanted to remain undetected. Alpha provided him with an AR view. In the distance, a man is visible with the help of Alpha's AR. The man in question doesn't have any lights on him to install, which made it even clearer to Akira that something was amiss. Akira reported to HQ that he had found someone he suspected to be a hunter, but he couldn't share location data and asked what he should do. HQ asked if he was certain. Akira replied that they didn't have to believe him but should at least advise him on what to do. HQ agreed and suggested that it might be a terminal malfunction. They told him to investigate. Akira inquired what he should do if it wasn't a malfunction. HQ instructed him to bring the individual to HQ if possible. If the person resisted, he had permission to use any means necessary. Regardless of the outcome, he was to report back as the situation developed. Akira understood and sighed, feeling that what he thought would be a simple task was turning into a problem. Alpha reminded him that HQ had authorized him to use lethal force if necessary and advised him not to hesitate if the situation escalated. Hoping he was just imagining things, Akira asked Alpha to back him up if anything went wrong. Alpha reassured him that he was in good hands. Akira took a deep breath and shouted that his terminal wasn't responding and asked if it might be broken, indicating it could be dangerous. The man turned towards him with a strange smile. The man seemed shocked to learn his terminal wasn't working and attempted to fix it, which confused Akira. The man pointed at his terminal, leading Akira to conclude that the man was trying to indicate a malfunction. Akira glanced at Alpha, who remained unperturbed. The man then stepped forward and walked toward Akira. Akira quickly raised his rifle, causing the man to panic and raise his hands. The man continued to advance toward Akira with his hands raised in the air. Akira glanced at Alpha again, but she seemed untroubled. Lowering his rifle, Akira noticed the man sighed with relief. As the man got closer, Akira watched his every move, ready to fire at a moment's notice. The man pointed at his terminal, holding it up in the air. Akira followed his gaze, but suddenly the man's other hand reached for his pistol and fired at Akira. Stunned, Akira was even more surprised that he managed to dodge the bullet. He quickly fired back at the man. Breathing heavily and shaken by the unexpected attack, Akira lost his composure. Alpha called out to him, snapping him back to reality. Instinctively, Akira slid into cover. In pain, Akira groaned. Alpha asked if he was all right. Slumped against the wall, Akira replied that he was, and Alpha explained that she had used his suit to move him and reassured him that his bones weren't broken. Akira apologized for not moving sooner. Alpha reassured him that it was fine and reminded him that having his back during situations like this was part of his job. Akira remembered this and asked Alpha about their current situation. Alpha reported that the enemy was skilled, and their gear and training seemed tailored for killing humans rather than monsters. Although Alpha used Akira's suit to return fire, the enemy remained unharmed. It seemed the enemy had chosen their firing position with the expectation that they might fail to kill Akira. Akira noticed that his terminal had been damaged and was now inoperable, which meant they couldn't contact HQ. He was frustrated, wondering why someone would go to such lengths to target him. What was a person like that doing down here? Resolute, Akira asked Alpha if he could defeat the enemy. Alpha confidently assured him that he could. She added that the moment the enemy's sneak attack failed, their luck had run out, which lifted Akira's spirits. Alpha instructed Akira to take some recovery capsules, the expensive ones. When Akira questioned if the cheaper ones would suffice, Alpha sarcastically responded that they might, provided he didn't mind having his limbs torn off. Agreeing to the cost, Akira noted that while his stock of old world medicines was running low, saving them wouldn't help if he were dead. After taking a few capsules, Alpha informed him that it was time for a counterattack and asked if he was ready. With his rifle prepared, Akira affirmed that he was ready to finish this confrontation with the unknown enemy. Meanwhile, Yujima, the man hiding behind a pillar, was confident that he had caught Akira off guard. However, he was puzzled by Akira's impressive reflexes. What was someone of Akira's level doing there? Yujima speculated that Akira might be a municipal agent. Had the city caught onto their plan and sent a cyborg operative disguised as a child? Regardless, Yujima needed to eliminate this threat quickly. He contacted his team, instructing them to adjust their plan and hurry to complete the tunnel to the surface. He warned them that the city might be closing in and promised to provide details later. He also requested backup from Kane and Nelia. He told his team to stop complaining since they knew they were risking a fight with the city when they decided to rob the ruins. They needed to move the relics quickly before the scanner lights were installed. Yujima hung up, reflecting on how smoothly their plan had been going. His team had infiltrated the security, hidden the loot, and only needed to extract the relics before the lights were operational. To achieve this, he needed to deal with Akira permanently. Peeking from behind the pillar, Yujima saw Akira aiming his rifle at him and preparing to shoot. Akira pointed his rifle at the pillar, with Alpha assisting him through AR to pinpoint the enemy's location, acting like a thermal scope. With the target in sight, Akira fired at the pillar, causing it to tremble under the impact. Though the pillar was taking a beating, it remained standing. Akira knew he needed to keep firing until he forced Yujima out into the open. With Alpha's help, Akira could track Yujima's movements, regardless of where he went. Yujima, however, shouted for him to stop shooting. He claimed he could explain the situation and apologized for mistaking Akira for an enemy. Akira's resolve didn't falter. He questioned why Yujima was trying to deceive him now. Yujima persisted with his smooth talk, asserting that he was a hunter from the recon team and suggested that Akira call HQ if he doubted him. Despite Yujima's attempts to clear things up, Akira continued firing at the pillar. His armor-piercing rounds should have been enough to penetrate walls, but the old-world construction proved resilient. Alpha informed Akira that the pillar couldn't withstand much more and encouraged him to keep firing. As the pillar began to show signs of giving way, because of Akira's action, not giving him a chance to surrender or even try to capture him alive, Yujima begins to wonder if Akira is really a city agent. Yujima guessed that if Akira could take down an old-world pillar, he must be using some kind of anti-material ammunition, possibly proprietary, CWH rounds. Yujima was uncertain why Akira had such high-caliber firepower but recognized that the oversized rifle was a key detail. Knowing this, Yujima decided that killing Akira would buy him plenty of time. As Akira continued to aim his rifle, Akira anticipated that the next shot would break through the pillar. Unexpectedly, Yujima kicked the pillar, causing it to collapse. The falling debris flew toward Akira too quickly for him to react, leaving him stunned as he watched Yujima aim his pistol at him. Yujima's plan was to exploit the bulkiness of Akira's rifle, ensuring that Akira couldn't adjust his aim in time. He intended to finish Akira off before he had a chance to shoot. To Yujima's surprise, Akira had already switched weapons in the brief moment of chaos. Both men fired simultaneously, and as the pillar crumbled, debris and dust scattered everywhere. Yujima found a large rock for cover, still grappling with the fact that Akira had managed to switch guns so quickly. He questioned who this opponent really was. Despite thinking he had caught Akira off guard again, Akira had evaded the attack and returned fire with surprising efficiency. Also, the look at his face. He seemed shocked, but he reacted immediately. How can his actions be so out of sync with his expression? Could it be that he's the same as him? Meanwhile, Akira also found a rock for cover and asked Alpha for a status update. She explained that the AH rounds hadn't caused significant damage and apologized for the inconvenience. Given that Yujima shrugged off high-pressure ammunition, Akira realized that his adversary was anything but ordinary. Akira aimed at the rock where Yujima was hiding, but the ancient construction proved too sturdy for his rounds to penetrate. Yujima took a mental note of Akira's unnervingly precise aim and guessed that Akira must be using a top-tier scanner. Combined with the CWH ammunition, Akira was clearly over-equipped for this area. This realization hit Yujima hard. Did Akira anticipate needing all this firepower? If so, did he know about them? The thought made Yujima break out in a cold sweat. Although Yujima was reluctant to use that, he saw no other option. He tossed something toward Akira, and it released a dense smoke. As the smoke spread, Alpha's AR support, which had been pinpointing Yujima's location, vanished. Alpha explained that the jamming smoke was interfering with the scanner's performance. If that were true, Akira should be unable to see Yujima either. Akira suspected that Yujima might be planning to make a run for it. Alpha clarified that jamming smoke can be formulated to leave specific tracking methods relatively unaffected. If Yujima's scanner was calibrated to work with his smoke, he could still track Akira nearly as well as before. This meant Akira couldn't see Yujima, but Yujima could still see him. Alpha's prediction proved accurate. Yujima's scanner detected Akira's position, and he began to move while Akira continued firing, destroying everything he thought might provide cover. Since Akira was blind to Yujima's position due to the smoke, Yujima could circle around to Akira's rear, making it nearly impossible for Akira to hit him, even with a lucky shot. Yujima carefully executed his plan, but then reconsidered. He reminded himself to stay calm and not rush things. He had twice thought he had Akira cornered, only to be outmaneuvered. But this time, with his plan, he was certain he would win. He knew he needed to strike as Akira fired. No, as Akira pulled the trigger. With Akira wielding an oversized rifle, it would be a liability at close range. If Yujima could close in an attack point blank, he could end this swiftly. With his enhanced ammunition, Yujima could blow Akira's brains out, even if they were heavily armored. As Yujima prepared to lunge toward Akira, ready to fire, he was shocked to find that his entire right hand was blown away, like paper consumed by flames. Yujima was not only stunned but in complete shock. He was sure Akira had lost track of him, so how did he know Yujima was behind him? The answer was simpler than it seemed. Alpha could see Yujima through the smoke. Reversing the jamming effect was child's play for her. While Akira's right hand ached from the recoil, Yujima's right hand was in even worse shape, having been blown off. Akira realized Yujima was a cyborg. He asked Alpha if they had defeated him. Alpha cautioned against celebrating too soon. Alpha explained that while they had neutralized his arm and pistol, effectively disarming him, Akira should finish him off with a headshot if he wanted to be sure. Akira asked why Alpha didn't aim for his head in the first place, and Alpha answered that it's for safety. Since his cyborg body could have been operated remotely, puppets like that don't always die from decapitation, so she prioritized disarming him first. Akira then asked how she figured out that he wasn't a human. Alpha answered that she got her biggest clue when he first met him. He was too good at lying with his face. To explain it further, she can see through most lies by analyzing changes in expression or tone of voice. Then Akira asked why she didn't warn him when he was about to get shot, and Alpha answered that it's because she also got fooled. Nothing in his expression suggested falsehood, but he was lying. In other words, he can completely decouple his face from his thoughts, and this level of control is only possible for cyborgs and androids. With her explanation, Akira finally gets it now. With that finish, Alpha then told Akira to decide what to do with him now. Akira agreed, but the pain in his right arm still hurts, but he still continued forward. As he approached Yujima closely with his rifle ready, Yujima thought about his next move. He has turned down his pain receptors, but he still lost a lot of output in his torso. Fighting Akira would be too risky for him. He wonders if he should buy time until his backup arrives, as Akira continues to approach Yujima cautiously. Yujima begged him to stop. He told Akira that he already beat him, so he begged him not to shoot. Akira then asked why he attacked him, to which he answered that it's just a misunderstanding. He begged Akira to hear him out, as it'll all make sense if he listens. Akira then asked Alpha if he's telling the truth. She answered that he really doesn't want to get shot, but his pleading is all just an act. Though he does want Akira to listen, he's lying about the misunderstanding. He's either trying to fool him or to buy time. This made Akira angry to think that he would stall for his allies to come. While glaring, Akira asked him how much time he still needs to save his skin. Yujima continued his act and disagreed about the stalling. He explained that it's nothing like that and begged him to believe him, as he's not lying. But with Alpha telling Akira that it's a lie, he can't fool him. Akira thinks about it. Since the HQ told Akira to bring Yujima alive if he could, Akira decided that he might as well take him alive now. Since they can probably learn a lot from him if they get him alive, if that's what Akira wants, Alpha told him that blasting his remaining limbs off will be more safe, which Akira agreed. His right arm then aches, which pains him. Alpha asked if he's hurt and told him that firing the CWH one-handed must have been too much for him and advised him to take plenty of medicine. As Akira put the last batch of his old world medicines, he cursed that it's his last batch already. Alpha told him that he just needed to live without it. He just needs to be more extra cautious from now on to not need it. With his injury becoming bearable, Akira readied his rifle. Yujima stared at him. He knew that Akira wouldn't kill him outright, as he would shoot off his arms and legs before he could even move, which is thoughtful. If Akira brings him to the HQ, he's done for. Now what's his next move, he wonders. Then a shout came out of nowhere asking what's going on. It was Reina and Shiori. Akira thought that they were the backup he was waiting for. Alpha told him that it looked like it. She wishes they'd arrived earlier, ideally while they were fighting. As Akira stared at them, Shijima knew in one glance that they all know each other, but they're not friends. He smiles because he's willing to bet that Akira is probably thinking that the situation is hard to explain, and he's worried they might not believe his story. And so, having these thoughts in mind, he knew he had to take this opportunity, and shouted that Akira was trying to kill him. Yujima's bullet zipped towards Akira, who was probably wishing he'd brought a bigger umbrella. Meanwhile, Cheryl's necklace, a gift from Akira, snapped with a pop. She panicked, convinced it meant Akira was in deep trouble. This necklace broke more often than a politician's promises, so Ario and Aricia were practically on speed dial for repairs. Two kids, probably bored and looking for a little excitement, were hanging out in a dingy alley. Heard there's a gang of kids, one whispered, think they'd let us join. They decided to find out, which is how they ended up face to face with Ario, two kids holding rifles, and a whole lot of attitude. We wanna join, they squeaked, bowing awkwardly. Ario, ever the diplomat, knocked on a door behind him. Boss, what do you think? He asked, and the kids practically fainted at the thought of meeting the fearsome leader. The door swung open with a bang, revealing Cheryl in a bright yellow uniform, her face a mask of sternness. Strength in numbers, she declared dramatically, holding up a sandwich board that read, Cheryl's Sandwiches, get your grub on. The kids, momentarily stunned, realized they'd stumbled into the most unlikely gang ever. Yujima kept up his charade, loudly accusing Akira of shooting him out of nowhere, claiming he tried to kill him. Akira, not one to back down, immediately shot back, figuratively this time, arguing that, sure, he pulled the trigger, but only because Yujima tried to kill him first. But Yujima wasn't having it. He doubled down, calling Akira a liar, saying Akira came at him, and he was just defending himself. Reina, caught in the middle of this mess, was understandably confused. As the two continued to bicker like schoolkids, Akira insisted that Yujima was spouting nonsense, claiming he was the one ambushed without warning. Of course, Yujima fired right back, again, figuratively, accusing Akira of being the one spreading lies, claiming he came charging in, guns blazing and shouting nonsense. Reina, getting nowhere fast with these two, turned to Shiori for some level-headed advice. Shiori glanced over at Akira. She knew Mr. Akira to be an honest man, someone who'd speak the truth even when it might cost him his life. So, she found it hard to believe he'd suddenly start making things up. However, Yujima's expression was equally convincing. He didn't seem like a man fabricating a story just to save his skin. Trapped between two compelling liars, or perhaps truth-tellers, Shiori suggested the sensible thing, contacting HQ for instructions. She asked if either of them had any objections. Akira, perhaps surprisingly, agreed. He even mentioned that HQ had sent him after Yujima in the first place, and he had full permission to kill the guy. But Yujima, still committed to his role, chimed in, sarcastically thanking Akira for stealing the words right out of his mouth. He urged Shiori to go ahead and make the call, promising HQ would back him up. Shiori tried to make the call, but, surprise, couldn't get through. Reina asked why, and Shiori guessed the signal might be weak. Conveniently, Yujima took the chance to blame Akira, claiming the jamming smoke was the culprit. Akira rolled his eyes and fired back that Yujima only suggested the call because he knew full well it wouldn't work. To which Yujima, ever the charmer, responded with a few colorful words, insisting it was Akira's smoke causing the interference. Reina, tired of the back and forth, asked Shiori if it might just be quicker to haul both of them in. Shiori agreed. It was probably the smartest move. So, she asked both men to cooperate and come along. Yujima, playing the part of the wounded victim, said he would, but as he tried to stand, he dramatically collapsed back to the ground. Classic. Akira, never one to let a good opportunity slip, pointed his gun at Yujima, making him squirm. Shiori quickly asked Akira to lower the weapon. Akira hesitated, probably wondering how much trouble he'd get into if he, accidentally, discharged his weapon. But after a bit of gentle nudging from Shiori, he eventually obliged. Shiori knew Akira well enough to sense he was in a foul mood, so she carefully tread around him, trying not to repeat any mistakes from their last encounter. Meanwhile, Akira was fully aware that Shiori was being cautious around him. He figured if he could just keep his cool for a little while longer. And then, out of nowhere, Alpha, ever the voice of reason, shouted at Akira to stop Reina. Too late. Both Akira and Shiori turned just in time to see Reina offering Yujima a hand. Reina, ever the helpful one, told Yujima she'd help him up. But before anyone could stop it, Yujima seized the opportunity, grabbing her hand and pulling her close. In the blink of an eye, Yujima had Reina in a chokehold, shouting at everyone not to move, effectively turning her into a human shield. Reina, still baffled by the sudden turn of events, demanded an explanation. Yujima, clearly amused by her innocence, sarcastically asked if she really needed him to spell it out. To make sure no one was confused, Yujima kindly clarified the situation. He was holding her hostage. If anyone dared to move, she'd be the first to go. And, to emphasize his point, he tightened his grip around her neck. With Reina at his mercy, Yujima ordered everyone to drop their weapons. Reina, though being choked, managed to tell Shiori not to do it. Yujima quickly silenced her by tightening his hold once more, making it clear who was in control. Yujima, realizing everyone was slow on the uptake, decided to make things crystal clear. He told them he could snap Reina's neck like a twig if they did anything stupid, all while squeezing her neck tighter to really drive the point home. This left Shiori with no choice but to drop her rifle and kick it over to Yujima. However, Yujima quickly noticed that Akira hadn't even considered dropping his weapon. He stared at Akira, waiting for his response, fingers itching to snap Reina's neck if necessary. Shiori, in a panic, apologized for Akira's defiance and started pleading with him. Then, she noticed the way Akira was glaring at Yujima. Her face darkened. She'd seen that look before, right before their last fight. That's why she called out to him. Akira, without even turning, said he could hear her loud and clear. Shiori begged him again to drop his weapon, this time with a little more Yujima, clearly feeling like his perfectly reasonable demands were being ignored, asked if the negotiations had somehow failed to penetrate Akira's thick skull. Did he not care if Reina died? Akira, unshaken, didn't even flinch, let alone drop his rifle. He just asked a single question. When would Yujima's demands stop? When his buddies showed up to kill them all. Yujima, still sticking to his bluff, acted confused. He claimed he didn't have any group and that he worked alone. He told Akira that if he just dropped his weapon, he'd slowly back away and let Reina go once he was far enough. Simple as that. But Akira wasn't buying it for a second. He knew that Yujima was a relic thief. The shocked look on Yujima's face said it all. Akira had hit the nail on the head. Akira explained how he'd figured it out. Yujima hadn't even tried to bluff earlier. He went straight for the kill. That only meant one thing. Once Yujima saw Akira's face, he had to take him out of the picture. Akira guessed Yujima must have stashed his loot nearby, which explained why he was so desperate to keep his identity hidden from HQ. After all, he was a cyborg. He could just swap his face later if needed. But witnesses? That was a different problem. If the city found out what Yujima looked like, they'd track him down in no time. And going up against the city meant one thing. A price on his head. Yujima's only play here was to eliminate them all. Akira laid it all out, then asked if he was wrong. Yujima, unimpressed, said that even if all that supposed nonsense was true, Reina would still die unless Akira dropped his weapon. Akira, ever the cool-headed type, countered by saying that if Yujima killed her, they'd absolutely kill him next. But judging by Yujima's smirk, Akira guessed the guy probably had some backup who were real heavy hitters. Yujima tightened his grip on Reina's neck, issuing his final warning to drop the gun. But Akira didn't budge. His response, a firm, unwavering, no. This shocked Shiori, while Yujima, knowing Akira was serious, just smirked. Yujima called Akira a heartless bastard for not caring about his lovely hostage, and asked if he didn't care about doing the right thing. Akira, with a sarcastic grin, responded that it was pretty rich hearing that from the guy holding said lovely hostage, in a chokehold. Yujima shot back, saying it was different for him. He was the bad guy. After all, he didn't have to worry about consequences. But, he added, good citizens like Akira didn't get to enjoy that kind of luxury. Yujima had figured Akira out. He was ready to blow Yujima away, hostage or no hostage, as soon as his backup arrived. So, Yujima decided to switch tactics. Since Akira didn't seem to care about Reina, he'd ask someone who did. With a calculated move, Yujima kicked Shiori's rifle back to her and told her that if she wanted Reina to live, she'd have to kill Akira. Akira, sensing the shift, immediately turned his attention to Shiori. He asked Alpha what Shiori would do, and Alpha, always the cold realist, answered that she'd attack him. Akira, surprised, asked why. Alpha explained that Shiori would probably want to save the hostage. After all, a living hostage had the potential to be rescued. Shiori wasn't the type to throw away that chance. Akira could only curse under his breath, regretting not taking Yujima out earlier. Alpha chimed in, telling him there was no point in crying over spilled milk. The focus now had to be on what could still be done. In the worst-case scenario, Alpha suggested they might need to kill them all. She asked Akira if he agreed. Akira nodded. He was with her. Shiori stood there, motionless. Yujima, thinking she also didn't care, scoffed that Reina was a waste of a hostage. To drive the point home, he tightened his grip on Reina's neck, lifting her up slightly, and declared that he'd just kill her. He might die, but his buddies would avenge him. This left Shiori with no choice. She picked up the gun, and without hesitation, pointed it at Akira. Akira, ready for it, reacted just in time. As they stood there, rifles aimed at one another, Akira fired the first shot. Shiori dodged with impressive reflexes and returned fire. Thanks to Alpha's guidance, Akira managed to avoid every one of her bullets. He quickly retreated, diving behind a massive piece of debris and aiming his rifle. He fired off another shot, hitting Shiori, but she skillfully tumbled and slid behind a large rock, finding cover before returning fire. Akira managed to dodge and slip behind the rock he had jumped earlier. Shiori couldn't help but remark on how incredible Akira's reflexes were. She found it hard to believe that he was actually keeping up with her speed. Regardless of who killed whom, Reina would still end up in deeper trouble. Shiori asked herself what the right move was. Just then, Akira took another shot at her. Thanks to her quick reflexes, Shiori dodged just in time, barely avoiding getting hit. Akira's bullet struck the large rock behind her, sending debris flying everywhere. Shiori, ever the opportunist, jumped upward into the air, letting the force from the scattered debris push her towards Akira. Akira, in the middle of reloading, could hardly believe what she had just pulled off. As he snapped the magazine into place, Shiori landed a well-placed kick on his rifle, sending it flying out of his hands and far into the distance. Not one to be outdone, Akira seized the moment and kicked Shiori's rifle out of her hands in return, leaving them both disarmed and ready for the next move. Katsuya and his team were also busy with their mission, setting up lights. However, Katsuya seemed distracted, his terminal open on his phone for a while now. Yumina, noticing his unease, asked if he was still worried about sending Reina and Shiori off on their own. Katsuya admitted he couldn't get in touch with them, which was odd. Yumina wondered aloud if something was blocking the signal. This was all Katsuya needed to hear. Making up his mind, he recklessly dashed off, telling his team that he was going to check on them. Meanwhile, as Shiori and Akira's battle raged on, both of their rifles had been knocked away. Akira leapt back, reaching for another rifle behind him, but Shiori wasn't about to let him gain the upper hand. She lunged forward, stopping him just in time, forcing the fight into brutal close-quarters combat. As the intensity of the battle grew, Reina could do nothing but watch, her worry for Shiori clear on her face. Yujima, meanwhile, was enjoying the show. Smirking, he silently cheered them on to wear each other down. The more they fought, the better it was for him. But Reina had had enough. She couldn't just stand by while they fought and risked their lives because of her mistake. With clenched fists, she slammed her elbow into Yujima's abdomen. Yujima, however, only smirked. He tightened his grip on her neck and sarcastically asked if that was an invitation for him to kill her. Apologizing mockingly, he said he was keeping his hostages alive for now. He added that she should give up any ideas of heroics or suicide because he knew how to make it look like she was still alive, and they wouldn't notice until it was too late. Reina's silent tears began to fall. Her heart sank as she realized that Shiori and Akira were in this mess because of her. Yujima seemed amused that just a few cruel words had already broken her spirit, figuring she wouldn't cause any more trouble. Back in the heat of battle, Akira found himself questioning how Shiori had gotten so good. He even asked Alpha if he really had a chance at winning this. Alpha, as usual, told him not to worry, advising him to grit his teeth and hang in there. Akira, in return, begged Alpha to figure something out before he lost all of his limbs. His whole body hurt like hell, and honestly, if Alpha told him they'd already been torn off, he might have believed her. Alpha's reassuring words that he'd be fine, I think, only made Akira more nervous. She went on to explain that Shiori was probably using a speed stim. Given her insane reaction time and evasive maneuvers, Alpha suspected it was a stim designed for short bursts of extreme speed rather than long duration. Akira was surprised to learn there were drugs that could make someone faster. He figured if that was the case, all he had to do was hold on until the stim wore off. Alpha confirmed this, adding that once Shiori's stim wore out, he'd come out on top. Akira, however, wasn't thrilled by the idea of losing a limb before that happened. His body was already sending him every possible danger signal. Alpha again reassured him, "You'll be fine, I think." Akira, increasingly skeptical, asked, "What's with all the, I think? Are you not sure?" Alpha just smiled, explaining that it wasn't certain Shiori had even taken a speed stim, and if she had, they didn't know how long it would last. All they could do was keep fighting. Whining wasn't going to make things any better. Akira knew she was right, so he focused on the fight, and with an overhead kick, he managed to slice a piece of cloth from Shiori's outfit. Shiori ripped off a piece of her clothing and threw it at Akira, clearly trying to fake an even match and drag the fight out. She had taken a dangerous stim, hoping to rescue Miss Reina while her captor was distracted. But Shiori hadn't counted on Akira being this capable. With things escalating, she couldn't afford to focus on anything except the battle in front of her. Yet, even as the fight pressed on, her thoughts kept drifting back to Reina. What would this mean for Miss Reina? What should she do? More importantly, what could Shiori do? As their clash raged on, Yujima watched from the sidelines and sneered. He noticed that Shiori wasn't putting in as much effort as she could. He even made a snide comment, something along the lines of, "If she wins, I'll at least make her death painless." Typical villain bravado. He still couldn't believe how easily Reina had walked into his trap. Now, all he had to do was wait for backup. Then, he noticed a rifle lying near him. That weapon could be a game changer, potentially even powerful enough to put a dent in Kane's armor. Ideally, he'd get rid of it now, while he still had the chance. But one glance at the brawl between Shiori and Akira, and Yujima knew that if nothing changed, Akira would win. His hostage tactic only worked on Shiori, and boy, did he regret how weak she turned out to be. He cursed under his breath, wondering if Kane and Nelia would make it in time. Maybe he shouldn't have told them to take their time. Shiori was clearly on her last legs, and Yujima figured he could take her down single-handedly. If Akira died, he could just ditch the hostage altogether. He eyed the rifle again and began inching towards it, slowly and carefully. He couldn't risk Akira noticing any sudden move, and Akira would shift his attention to Yujima. His plan was simple. Use that rifle to blow Akira away, just like how he shot his arm off earlier. As he edged closer to the weapon, Akira managed to smack Shiori's right hand away. With an opening, Akira drove his elbow into her gut, knocking her off balance. Seizing the moment, Yujima ditched Reina and sprinted for the rifle. Akira spotted this and immediately gave chase, but Yujima had already reached the gun. With a triumphant grin, Ujima grabbed the rifle and aimed it straight at Akira, screaming something dramatic like, "Go to hell." But when he pulled the trigger, nothing. No bullets. Ujima stood there in stunned silence as Akira closed the distance, charging straight at him. Before he knew it, Akira landed a solid punch to Ujima's face, sending him flying. Ujima, dazed and confused, couldn't believe what had just happened. How could the rifle be empty? Akira had swapped magazines earlier, so how could it be out of ammo? The horrifying realization hit him. Had Akira loaded an empty magazine on purpose? In the middle of that chaotic fight, Ujima couldn't fathom it. It was the kind of tactical foresight that Ujima hadn't even considered. Was it possible Akira had reloaded just to mess with his head? Had he left one round in the chamber to fire off earlier, all while slipping in an empty mag? Was this all part of some elaborate trap? Ridiculous. But the thought lingered in Ujima's mind. Had he been playing right into Akira's hands all along? As Akira snatched the rifle from Ujima and reloaded it with a fresh magazine, Ujima panicked. He tried to beg for his life, but Akira wasn't having it. Without hesitation, Akira shot him in the head, ending it right there. And he didn't stop. Akira kept firing, shattering Ujima's body into pieces. Meanwhile, Shiori saw her chance and dashed over to Reina, who was coughing and trying to catch her breath. Shiori asked if she was all right, to which Reina responded by asking if they were finally safe. But Shiori's relief was short-lived. She noticed Akira approaching them, rifle at the ready. Akira, in his mind, reasoned with Alpha. He figured there was no reason to keep fighting anymore, so he asked if lowering his gun would end things peacefully. Alpha, always the realist, reminded him that he had missed his chance to kill his enemies earlier, simply because those people didn't believe him. Shiori had attacked him just to save Reina. Alpha added that it wouldn't be surprising if they assumed Akira held a pretty serious grudge at this point. Akira guessed Alpha was right. Shiori's speed stim had mostly worn off, but Alpha suspected she had another dose ready to go, and she doubted Shiori would hesitate to use it, even if an overdose would kill her. Akira had already figured as much. If Shiori were afraid of dying, she would have bailed long ago. Alpha warned Akira that Shiori might be willing to sacrifice herself to kill him and save Reina from any future revenge. It was still a real possibility. Knowing that, Alpha asked if Akira will still lower his gun. At this point Akira had no second thought as everything Alpha just said might be possible. Shiori, on the other hand, tried to de-escalate the situation. She told Akira they had no desire to fight him anymore, and politely asked if he could lower his weapon. Shiori, trembling, said that Akira had every right to be angry. She sincerely apologized, even going so far as to offer her life in atonement if that's what Akira wanted. He could make any demand, and she would comply without hesitation. Desperate, Shiori continued to beg, taking full responsibility for harming him, but she pleaded for mercy on Miss Reina, insisting that everything was her fault. As Shiori's voice wavered, Akira fired a shot, barely missing both of them. He coldly ordered them not to move. Shiori's nerves were stretched to the breaking point. She knew her speed stim was wearing off, and Akira was likely watching her closely for any signs of a second dose. But she had no more tricks up her sleeve. What could she do? What was the next move? Then, without warning, Shiori collapsed to the ground. Reina rushed to her side, asking if she was hurt and begging her to hang in there. Shiori, however, could only apologize weakly, telling Reina to run. Her body simply wouldn't respond anymore. As she lay there, she couldn't help but wonder why Akira hadn't fired yet. Was he just waiting for the stim to wear off completely? Did he not want to fight anymore? If that was the case, maybe they could talk their way out of this. But before she could dwell on it, Akira suddenly turned and started firing. Shouts echoed from behind as Katsuya's team burst onto the scene. Katsuya yelled, asking if everyone was okay. Reina, hearing his voice, called out in disbelief. Was that really Katsuya? Akira, however, just sighed in exasperation, muttering something like, "Not this again." Shiori realized that Katsuya's team was walking right into the same mess they had been in just moments ago. Akira clearly wasn't thrilled with the idea of fighting 5 against 1. Shiori desperately wanted to shout for Katsuya and his team to stop. After all, Akira had finally started to calm down. Why did Katsuya have to pick this exact moment to show up and make things worse? Earlier, Alpha told Akira to lower his rifle. Akira hesitated, asking if she was sure. After all, Shiori might take another stim or have some trick up her sleeve. But Alpha calmly reassured him that in their current situation, she would warn him immediately if Shiori tried anything. Of course, if Akira was still worried, he could always just shoot her. Akira shook his head, refusing. That didn't feel right. Suddenly, he noticed someone approaching and asked if it was Ujima's backup. Alpha reassured him again. It wasn't Ujima's reinforcements, just some other hunters checking out the situation. As Katsuya's team drew closer, they saw Akira pointing his rifle at Shiori and Reina. Immediately, Katsuya raised his gun, but Akira was faster and fired first. Katsuya and his team dove for cover, and Akira asked Alpha why he missed. Alpha nonchalantly explained that she made sure it was just a warning shot. Akira was not impressed. Why would she give them a warning shot when they were ready to shoot him? He should have at least hit them, even if it wasn't fatal. Alpha, ever the pragmatist, responded that no one said Katsuya's team wasn't about to fire a warning shot too. Since Akira was outnumbered 5-1, she suggested he avoid making any more enemies than necessary. Akira could only grumble at Alpha's cautious attitude. Katsuya's team was clearly bad news, and Akira definitely didn't like the odds of 5-1. On the other side, Katsuya asked why Akira was fighting Reina and Shiori. Yumina, looking equally puzzled, said she didn't know but warned Katsuya not to do anything rash. Katsuya, getting worked up, demanded to know what she meant by that. They needed to save them, fast. Yumina shot him a glare, shutting him up. She wanted to save them too, but in one piece. Katsuya needed to cool his jets. Grudgingly, Katsuya agreed. He then asked what Yumina's plan was. Yumina turned to Irie, asking if she could contact HQ. Irie quickly reported that she couldn't. Yumina couldn't believe it. Just what was messing with the signal? Katsuya, growing impatient, shouted for Akira to stand down and let Reina and Shiori go. Whatever was going on, Katsuya was sure Akira didn't want to pick a fight with Druncam. He assured him it wasn't too late to make demands if he had any. But as Katsuya readied his rifle, Akira fired another warning shot before he could even leave cover. Yumina noticed something odd. Akira was shooting like he could see them behind their cover. Did he have some kind of high-end scanner or something? She was starting to wonder. Yumina made a decision. She told Katsuya she would try talking to Akira and asked Irie to keep Katsuya from doing anything stupid. Her teammates were confused, but they trusted her and went along with it. Yumina dropped her rifle on the ground, and Akira, watching through his enhanced vision, wondered why she would do that. Taking a deep breath, Yumina stepped out of cover with her hands raised. Katsuya, alarmed, yelled if she'd lost her mind, but Irie held him back. Yumina thought to herself, Akira hadn't shot her. Just as she suspected, he must have seen her disarm herself through the wall. On Akira's end, he questioned if Yumina had figured out that he could see them. It was the only explanation for her dropping her weapon behind cover. No wonder Alpha was being so cautious around them. Yumina noticed something key. Akira hadn't shot Reina or Shiori, nor did he use them as human shields. This could only mean one thing. Akira wouldn't shoot an unarmed person for no reason. So far, everything was going according to her plan, but she wasn't in the clear just yet. Yumina asked Akira if she could talk to him. She continued, explaining that they only came to help Reina and Shiori, not to stir up trouble. She wanted to get them out of there without fighting Akira, and asked if that was possible. Even though she didn't know exactly what went down, the fact that he defeated Shiori was undeniable. Yumina wasn't eager to take on someone capable of that. Akira asked Alpha for her take, and Alpha confirmed that Yumina was being honest. Yumina then added that while she really didn't want to fight anyone who could beat Shiori, leaving Reina and Shiori behind wasn't an option. Their syndicate wouldn't be thrilled about that. So, all she really wanted was to recover them and get out of there. Once again, Akira checked with Alpha, who confirmed she was telling the truth. Akira then summarized, asking Yumina if what she meant was that she just wanted to rescue her teammates without fighting him, and was wondering if they could make that work. Yumina confirmed. Akira stared at her, rifle still at the ready. Sure, he and she might be fine with that arrangement, but it wouldn't matter if her friends decided otherwise. Immediately, Yumina turned to look behind her. Did Katsuya pull any stunts? She did tell him not to do anything stupid, or was Akira just bluffing? With a sigh, Yumina asked if they were on the same page. Akira agreed. Yumina then made a bold suggestion. She offered to take Reina and Shiori's place as his hostage. She asked if that sounded good. Her reasoning was simple. Her teammates wouldn't be able to chase Akira down if they had to focus on getting Reina and Shiori to safety. And even after he let them go, he'd still have her. Seemed like a clean solution. As Yumina started to approach, Akira told her to stop and asked about her suit. Yumina briefly considered stripping, but realized that unplugging the energy pack would be enough. She removed the power pack from her suit and held it up to Akira. Alpha confirmed that her suit was now powered off. Satisfied, Akira instructed Yumina to turn around and back up towards him, slowly. Once she was close enough, Akira grabbed her by the collar. Yumina shouted to Katsuya and Irie that it was now safe, and they should take Reina and Shiori and get out of there. Katsuya, seeing Yumina being used as a human shield, was understandably concerned. He asked what was going on. Yumina reassured him that she was fine and urged them to get Shiori and Reina out of the area, and to explain everything to HQ. But Katsuya wasn't having it. He demanded a proper explanation. He still had no idea what was happening. Yumina smiled, telling him to get moving already. She was counting on them. Meanwhile, Akira remained hidden quietly behind Yumina, his rifle ready, observing the situation as it unfolded. Katsuya glared at Akira, demanding to know what the hell was wrong with him. Yumina, however, told Katsuya not to worry about her and to just get moving. He came there to save Reina and Shiori, so he should follow through and get them out of there. Katsuya could only curse under his breath, frustrated by the situation, but he had no other choice. As he lifted Shiori, she whispered weakly for him to make sure to get Reina to safety. Reluctantly, Katsuya instructed Irie to carry Reina. Reina, on the verge of tears, started apologizing, blaming herself for everything. But Katsuya wasn't having it. He told her she was being ridiculous. After all, Akira was the one who took Yumina hostage. But Reina, in a broken voice, insisted it was her fault. Katsuya was left bewildered, wondering what on earth had happened to make her feel this way. As the group distanced themselves, Akira continued to aim his rifle at Yumina. Yumina, keeping her cool, asked if she could leave now, but Akira told her to keep walking and try contacting HQ as they moved. Yumina explained she had already tried earlier but couldn't get through. Akira nodded, explaining that it was because of the jamming smoke in the area. He reassured her that once they got far enough, her terminal should work. Since his own terminal was smashed, he told her to make the call for him and to hurry up about it. As time passed, Yumina asked why Akira had fought Shiori and what exactly had happened back there. Akira, blunt as ever, told her to ask Shiori about it later. Yumina pressed further, wondering why he couldn't just explain it to her. That question seemed to hit a nerve. Akira, visibly irritated, snapped back, asking why she'd waste her breath talking to him. She didn't know him, so why trust anything he said? Surprised by his anger, Yumina quickly apologized, genuinely feeling guilty for pushing him. This caught Akira off guard, who hadn't expected an apology. As they continued walking, Akira couldn't help but ask why Yumina had volunteered to be his hostage just to settle things. She explained that by talking things out, she figured they could avoid a fight. Losing any of her friends by going up against someone who took down Shiori wasn't something she was willing to risk. Akira, intrigued, asked what she would have done if he had actually shot her. Yumina simply shrugged, saying if that happened, there was nothing she could have done about it. This answer left Akira stunned. Then Yumina smiled at him, genuinely thanking him for holding his fire. Akira, still processing everything, could only manage a dumbfounded, sure. Her reckless courage made Akira wonder how anyone could take such a gamble with their life. He knew he wouldn't have done it, not even if the odds were in his favor. What kind of life made someone act like that? It was a mindset he couldn't comprehend. Finally, Yumina managed to contact HQ. Akira overheard her and clearly state his number, 27, and report that there were 3 injured in combat with a suspect. He also added that further combat was impossible as the suspect was dead, but there was a serious risk of the suspect having allies, possibly relic thieves. He requested combat specialists for support and rescue. He explained he was using another hunter's terminal since his had been destroyed during the fight. Furthermore, Druncam has rescued the 2 injured hunters. After his report, HQ responded, asking, 27, to wait, clearly not finished with the conversation. But Akira, unfazed, told Yumina they were done and she could leave now. Since he was heading to HQ as well, Akira offered to walk with her if she was going the same way. Yumina, still reeling from everything that just happened, politely declined but thanked him for the offer. Before parting ways, Akira gave Yumina one last piece of advice, not to return to the room from earlier. The guy who attacked Reina and Shiori might have reinforcements on the way. With that, Akira dashed off, leaving Yumina standing there. She shouted after him, asking him to wait, wanting to know more about what had happened. But Akira was already gone. Back on HQ's side, they asked Yumina what was going on, but she was still trying to wrap her head around everything herself. Meanwhile, a group of reinforcements grumbled about how cramped the tunnel was as they moved forward. Upon arriving at the scene, they found Yujima's remains, his head blown clean off. No one had even bothered to take his brain implant. These grumblers were Yujima's backup, suited up in what looked like robot power suits. One of them sighed, saying they should move on if there was nothing else they could do, but another pointed out there might be some relics Yujima had hidden nearby. Since they didn't find any other corpses besides Yujima's, it was safe to assume the one who killed him had already made a clean getaway. At the very least, HQ would be aware of the fighting and would send more hunters to investigate soon. The relic thieves couldn't risk trying to grab the relics and fight off hunters at the same time, which wasn't wrong at all. Kane, the one complaining the most, knew this. He should have quit griping already. Kane, however, couldn't help but notice Nelia's rather cold behavior. Not a single hint of sadness. Weren't she and Yujima a couple? Nelia, without missing a beat, replied that the past was the past. No point dwelling on it. Just as Nelia had predicted, hunters from HQ came running in. They spotted the relic thieves, and without hesitation, opened fire. After all, they were the enemy. But the hunters, bullets just bounced harmlessly off Kane and Nelia's armor. Not wasting any time, the 2 relic thieves fired back with their heavy weaponry, wiping out the hunters in an instant. Meanwhile, back at HQ, Akira was wrapping up his report. The staff had heard everything they needed and told him he was free to go. They even mentioned they had an infirmary in case he needed medical attention, but gave him a little warning. It's not free, and prices can be brutal. As Akira headed to the infirmary, he still couldn't believe how the team that went to investigate got completely wiped out. Alpha chimed in, suggesting it was probably Yujima's accomplices who did the dirty work. It was lucky they managed to get out when they did. Akira agreed, but couldn't help but wonder why he kept having so many close calls. Was his luck really that bad? Alpha, always quick with a quip, said that his luck might be worse now, considering he almost abandoned that lovely hostage back there. She cheekily added that maybe doing more good deeds would help turn things around. Akira, exhausted, asked for a break. If he had dropped his gun back there, he knew he'd be dead by now. Alpha agreed but added it was probably just his bad luck again. Akira couldn't help but agree. Such a shame. Even with Alpha's top-tier support, it seemed like nothing could make up for his awful luck. Alpha sarcastically apologized, saying she was doing her best, but it really wasn't easy working with his kind of luck. After all, he should know that better than anyone. Akira had no choice but to agree. He knew that without Alpha's help, he'd have been dead long ago. As he finally stepped into the infirmary, Akira knew he had to keep an eye on the prices. He figured they'd be charging wasteland rates, probably an arm and a leg, literally. Following where the uninsured folks went, Akira found himself in what looked more like a lab than an infirmary. He stopped in his tracks as a doctor greeted him, introducing the place as the Yatsubayashi Clinic, Kuzuhara Ruins branch. The doctor himself, Dr. Yatsubayashi. The doctor welcomed Akira to the Yatsubayashi Clinic, Kuzuhara Ruins branch, and introduced himself as Dr. Yatsubayashi. Now, let's get down to business. He asked how Akira planned to pay. Akira responded that he'd prefer to have it deducted from his earnings, which the doctor readily accepted. He explained that while the exams were free, thanks to municipal support, everything else came with a price tag. So, if Akira couldn't afford treatment, he shouldn't blame the doctor for his wallet's misfortunes. As Akira peeled off his power suit, Dr. Yatsubayashi began his examination. "You're lucky your injuries are only minor," he said. However, he still recommended treatment and inquired how much Akira wanted fixed up. Akira raised an eyebrow at the minor label, especially since his arms and legs felt like they'd been run over by a truck. The doctor clarified that serious injuries would involve torn off limbs or exposed and ruptured organs. Basically, anything that would send a person screaming into the nearest hospital. That aside, Akira's injuries were indeed minor. Still wincing, Akira insisted that since it hurt to move, he wanted Dr. Yatsubayashi to patch him up as best as he could. The doctor obliged and pulled out a healing agent he had invented. He highly recommended it and even offered Akira a discount, which sounded suspiciously enticing. But Akira noticed the concoction was a bright green color, prompting him to refuse quickly. It looked like bad news in a bottle. The doctor approached him with a strangely creepy grin, assuring Akira that it was perfectly safe. He had analyzed old-world relics and developed the medicine to replicate their effects. According to him, it was practically ancient medicine, far superior to any cheap pill on the market. Alpha chimed in, trying to assure Akira that the doctor was not a cyborg, and his expressions appeared entirely genuine, which led her to believe he wasn't lying. However, she did admit that with the doctor's quirky behavior, it was a bit hard to trust him. Akira couldn't help but agree. After contemplating his options, Akira thought that if it was on par with old-world meds, it might come in handy. But then again, Dr. Yatsubayashi opened his briefcase and revealed some old-world medicine, stating that if Akira let him use his special medicine, he'd sell him some of the ancient meds he kept on hand. Curious, Akira immediately asked Alpha if his instincts were correct about the capsules. Alpha confirmed that those were indeed the same type he had discovered in the ruins and urged him to snag them if he could. "Just how many are you willing to sell me, and for what price?" Akira inquired. The doctor replied that he only had one pack available, priced at a staggering 2 million orum. Those weren't typically for sale. He kept them for treating seriously injured patients and wouldn't haggle on price or quantity. Akira nodded, deciding to go for it, and asked the doctor to deduct it from his earnings as well. The doctor was delighted to hear this. With Akira's permission granted, Dr. Yatsubayashi began injecting the medicine he created into several places on Akira's body. "Hold still," he instructed with a grin. After what felt like a small eternity, they finally wrapped up the treatment. Dr. Yatsubayashi advised Akira to rest for at least an hour and reminded him to keep mum about the special medicine he sold him. As Akira sat there, wrapped in bandages, he asked the doctor how much he owed for today's visit. Dr. Yatsubayashi replied with a cheerful tone, 100 grand, but don't worry, I'm confident you'll love the results. This was, of course, after he deducted his participation fee. Dr. Yatsubayashi bowed and thanked Akira for participating in the clinical trial, inviting him to return if he ever got the chance, as he always needed more data. Akira was taken aback to learn that it was merely a trial. Just then, a stretcher wheeled in with a patient, and the doctor mentioned that an urgent case had arrived. "Time for you to scram," Dr. Yatsubayashi said, shooing Akira away, claiming that his minor injuries were just getting in the way. He could only hope he could save all the newbies. As Akira followed the doctor, he asked if that was everyone. As far as he knew, some were already pushing daisies. "Ah, that's where you're mistaken," Dr. Yatsubayashi replied. "Some hunters have partially cyberized heads or injected life support nanomachines, allowing them to stave off brain death even if they're decapitated. You'd be surprised how often a timely operation can bring them back from the brink. Of course, this is only if they can afford treatment. Cyberization isn't cheap, and they might spend their entire lives paying it off. But hey, that's not Dr. Yatsubayashi's problem. If you're aware of this, then get out," he said, prompting Alpha to sarcastically ask Akira if he was glad his injuries were only minor. Well, I guess so, Akira replied, feeling a bit like a lucky penny in a junkyard. Outside the ruins in the wasteland, several people, including 2 armored individuals, approached a truck. Kane asked Nelia if she could unlock the truck, but she flatly replied, no. In a fit of frustration, Kane punched the truck, cursing Ujima for leaving them with one hell of a memento. Nelia calmly explained that it was Revengeware, a program activated upon Ujima's death, designed to reward whoever managed to take down his killer. The truck had locked down the moment he died, and her guess was that their relics were the bounty on offer. Kane realized that they couldn't leave with their loot unless they cleared the lock, so he implored Nelia to come up with a solution. She sighed and said she couldn't hack into it there, they'd just have to give up. This infuriated Kane, who stomped his armored feet on the ground, shouting that he wouldn't just throw in the towel. Do you even realize how much I invested in this plan? He yelled. Those relics could fetch a minimum of 10 billion aurum, or even more. Kane had spent a fortune getting them this far, and he was dead set on not ditching them now. Nelia, however, clarified that she wasn't suggesting they abandon the relics. Kane furrowed his brow and asked what she meant. She explained that they just had to give up on bypassing the Revengeware. They'd have to unlock it the old-fashioned way. She pointed at a picture of Akira, saying they needed to eliminate him. Back in the underground during the Urata Scorpion's extermination job, Akira noticed that his treatment seemed to have worked wonders. Alpha commented that the doctor must be better than he appeared. It was indeed a sweet deal, especially since they'd secured old-world medicine in the bargain. Akira mused aloud, are you saying I actually got lucky? But considering my track record, I'm guessing this balances out the scales. Meanwhile, in a certain hallway, a man in suit is asking his staff if they still couldn't contact the temporary base. His staff reported that they were unable to reach them, explaining that the colorless fog surrounding the base was too dense for communication until it cleared. The man sighed. Just when they needed to report those pesky relic thieves, this happened. But they could still relay the information directly. He instructed his men to find an unoccupied hunter to carry their message. One of the men bowed and replied, Sir, consider it done. The unlucky hunter assigned to this task was none other than Akira. He informed Alpha that it was just one quick trip to the base, and they could call it a day. What a stroke of luck. He could hardly wait to head home and finally get some rest. Sounds like a plan, Alpha replied. Your suit isn't in the best shape anyway. Akira couldn't help but think that today had been a killer ride. Out of nowhere, Alpha seized control of Akira's suit, flooring the accelerator and sending them skidding away. Akira, confused, asked Alpha what on earth was happening. Just then, he glanced upward to see dozens of missiles raining down on him. The explosions rocked the area, leaving nothing but chaos in their wake. The culprits were none other than Nelia and Kane, perched atop a nearby building, looking quite pleased with themselves. Kane declared that the explosions should be enough to get the truck moving, turning to Nelia for confirmation. However, luck wasn't on their side. The truck remained locked. Why is it still locked? I just took out the target, Kane complained. The answer was simple. The system either hadn't seen enough to confirm Akira's demise, or he was still alive and kicking. Nelia suggested that Kane should dig out the body. A visual of his severed head would surely satisfy the program's requirements. While Nelia had nothing against flashy kills, she warned that if that colossal explosion made it impossible to confirm Akira's death, she'd hold Kane accountable. Fine, Kane agreed, already grumbling as he started to sift through the debris from the explosion in search of what was left of Akira. But he wasn't there. Did the blast send him flying? Kane wondered as he continued to search. To his surprise, he stumbled upon Akira's motorcycle, which meant he couldn't be far off. Nelia chimed in that finding the motorcycle wasn't good enough. They needed Akira's body. Kane rolled his eyes, exclaiming he was already on the hunt. As his scanner scanned the area, he finally located Akira. But instead of finding a lifeless corpse, he was astonished to see Akira still standing, rifle at the ready. Just moments earlier, as the missiles were about to strike, Alpha calculated their trajectories. She determined that evasion was impossible, leaving her with no choice but to defend. Using Akira's powered suit, she stepped out of the vehicle, accelerating it to give Akira the chance to lift his motorcycle as a makeshift shield. As the missiles struck the motorcycle, Alpha used Akira's legs to propel him away from the blast. The impact sent him flying, and he landed painfully, his back screaming in protest. As soon as he hit the ground, his body spun around from the force, crashing into a piece of debris that collapsed and revealed an open hole beneath him. With everything happening at lightning speed, Akira struggled to process what was going on. Was he dreaming? When did he doze off? These questions swirled in his mind as he fought to regain his focus. Get up, Alpha shouted, urging him to fight back if he wanted to survive. There was no time to waste. Despite the pain radiating through his body, Akira forced himself up, gripping his rifle tightly. He climbed out of the hole and took position among the debris, aiming his rifle at Kane. Without a moment's hesitation, he pulled the trigger, catching Kane completely off guard. Suddenly, Kane's armored suit lit up like a flashlight in the dark. Akira was taken aback by this unexpected turn of events, but with Alpha's guidance, he dashed away in the nick of time. Kane readied his rifle and fired back without missing a beat, but Akira had already jumped down, taking cover behind some debris. Nelia, hearing the commotion, immediately asked Kane what was happening. Did he run into a monster? She wondered aloud. No, the little brat is still alive. Kane snapped back. Nelia, with a sarcastic tone, reminded him that he had claimed to finish Akira off. Kane, frustrated, explained that Akira had dodged his missiles and even managed to land a hit on him before escaping. That shot had done a number on Kane's force field armor. Nelia found it odd that a hunter would bring such powerful ammunition underground, where it seemed pointless to use. Kane explained that the weapon was a CWH, with proprietary ammo, and they were left questioning why anyone would drag such a thing into the tunnels. Is Akira planning to hunt tanks or something? This makes no damn sense. Kane exclaimed in exasperation. Nelia recalled that before Yajima bit the dust, he had mentioned that the city might be involved in their plan. This revelation made everything click for her, and Kane agreed. It made perfect sense, and the CWH was likely insurance against them. If they were really unlucky, the city defense force might already be on their way, and Kane wasn't keen on facing them. Nelia reassured him that if they dispatched Akira quickly, they wouldn't have to worry. After all, they couldn't call for backup yet, thanks to the pesky colorless fog. So they set off to hunt Akira. As he ran, panting heavily, Akira noted that Kane had shrugged off a CWH proprietary round. Alpha explained that Kane's force field armor was the reason behind it. She elaborated that the flash from Akira's bullet was called impact conversion luminescence. The armor mitigated the impact by converting some kinetic energy into light, effectively rendering the shot less effective. But Akira interrupted, saying he didn't care about the science lesson right now. What he needed was a plan. He quickly took some pills and asked Alpha what to do next after blocking his shots. Alpha advised him to keep firing and hope to deal some damage. Does he have a weak point or something? Akira inquired. With a sigh, Alpha replied that given his current power level, the answer was no. She advised him to forget about weak points and focus on putting as much distance between himself and them as possible. Akira quickly realized that they couldn't outrun their pursuers, which Alpha confirmed with a grim nod. She lamented that she had to sacrifice his motorcycle just to keep him alive, and losing it really put them in a tight spot. She continued, suggesting that Akira could always hope his enemies were exceptionally slow and that their weapons couldn't reach him. Alpha then cheekily asked if he cared to bet on those odds. Akira flatly refused. Meeting her had been his lucky break, and he wasn't going to rely on any more luck. Having accepted his fate, Akira felt a wave of resignation wash over him. Alpha stared at him, trying to lift his spirits with a smile, insisting that she still planned to win this. She playfully asked if he thought her support was just bargain bin trash that couldn't handle a little dilemma like this. Alpha encouraged him to maintain a strong will, asserting that today would be just another day at the office. Akira looked at her, and they shared a brief, reassuring smile. He recalled that he had promised to hold on to his resolve and determination, apologizing for almost losing his nerve. With his morale boosted, he stood tall, rifle at the ready, and declared that he was prepared whenever she was. Alpha couldn't help but comment on his newfound determination. Meanwhile, Nelia and Kane arrived at the building where Akira was hiding. Nelia urged Kane to make things quick, but just then, a small flash erupted in the building, and before they could react, a bullet struck them. Luckily, their shield absorbed the impact, but that shot had just given away Akira's position. Kane immediately started shooting at where Akira was hiding. Fortunately, the wall provided enough cover for Akira, prompting Nelia to comment on how surprisingly sturdy it was and even wondering when it was built. Kane, however, was furious. He couldn't care less about the wall's history and asked if the truck was unlocked. Just then, another flash lit up the building as another bullet whizzed past them. Kane could only curse under his breath as Akira continued to fight back. He finally landed a hit on Kane, forcing him to retreat a bit. Frustrated, Kane unleashed a barrage of gunfire in retaliation. Akira ducked for cover from the onslaught. Talk about firepower, he joked, thinking he'd be turned to mulch if he got hit. He asked Alpha if his shots were even doing any damage. Alpha confirmed they were indeed having an effect. Even if Kane looked unscratched, his force field armor was draining energy with every hit, so Akira shouldn't worry and just keep firing. With Alpha's AR support, Akira could pinpoint the locations of his enemies. He nodded at her suggestion and shot back. Kane immediately fired in response, but thanks to Alpha's guidance, Akira dodged effortlessly. Nelia noted that Kane had missed, and Kane, ever the sore loser, reasoned that he had almost gotten him. This back and forth continued, with Kane missing shot after shot, and Nelia was far from impressed with his performance. As Kane finally got hit, his barrier deflected the bullet, leading him to curse loudly, wondering why he couldn't hit Akira. Nelia marveled at how Akira managed to keep up. She speculated that he might be a city agent, but Kane shot down that theory. He argued that there were no city agents equipped with scanners that could see through every move they made, urging Nelia to be realistic. But Nelia explained that she didn't mean it that way. Even Kane had to acknowledge that parts of the Kuzuhara ruins were still functional. Kane was baffled by her train of thought, asking what that had to do with anything. Nelia elaborated that city agents had brought back a relic that displayed a detailed map of the entire ruins in real time. She pointed out that she shouldn't have to explain to Kane how absurd old-world technology could be. It might even show the trajectories of every bullet fired, as well as their movements and locations. In short, the city could be using that map as an ultra-high-end scanner, which would explain how their agent could anticipate their incoming attacks. But of course, that was just a shot in the dark. Frustrated, Kane grumbled that Akira had messed with the wrong guy. Nelia raised an eyebrow, surprised by Kane's reaction. Alpha quickly advised Akira to move farther inside the building, as Kane had just launched dozens of missiles in his direction. As the missiles approached, Akira sprinted away, doing his best to escape. The missiles struck where he had just been, engulfing the area in flames. As the fire roared to life, Nelia questioned Kane's sanity, reminding him that if he blew Akira to bits, they might not even be able to identify his remains. Kane, frustrated, snapped at Nelia to shut it, reasoning that if Akira was a city agent, there would still be enough left of him to identify. Nelia sighed and decided she would go take a look. Even if she only found scraps, close-up footage of his corpse should suffice. She then ominously stated that if Akira was somehow still alive, she would kill him. Turning to Kane, she instructed him to sit tight and wait. Kane hesitated, asking if she was going in alone. Nelia assured him that she didn't want him accidentally setting off another fireworks display and reassured him that her blades would get the job done. Kane agreed and asked if she was still sticking to her no-guns policy. Nelia confirmed this, reasoning that guns would only get in her way. On the other hand, Akira managed to survive yet again. Grateful that he hadn't blacked out this time, he heard Alpha instructing him to take all the recovery capsules he had left before it's too late. Akira complied but couldn't help asking why they were after him. Alpha apologized, admitting that she was just as clueless. She guessed they might be accomplices of the man he had taken out underground. Akira, with a hint of sarcasm, remarked that they must have really adored him. If Alpha's theory was correct, maybe they assumed that last attack had finished him off and would just leave. However, from Alpha's perspective, she suspected they would keep coming until they confirmed Akira was truly dead. Akira nodded. It made sense, but he wondered why they were so obsessed with him. Just when he thought he was done for the day, another problem popped up. Nothing seemed to be going right for him today. He pondered whether ignoring the hostage earlier had really been the reason his luck had taken a nosedive. That's hardly seems fair since the hostage made it out okay in the end. Alpha just smiled, brushing it off. Meanwhile, Nelia jumped through one of the windows, giggling as she fiddled with her device. It was a system that allowed her to access a map of the ruins. When she had stolen that relic, she had no idea it would come in handy so soon. As she connected the wires to her neck, with a snap, the entire platform transformed into a third-person perspective for her, allowing her to see through walls. As Nelia observed how well it performed, she realized it worked perfectly. Now she just had to overlay it onto her map and bingo. She finally located Akira, still in disbelief that he had survived that last encounter. As she looked closer, she noticed Alpha's appearance. She assumed that Akira had a backup plan. Akira, spotting Alpha's changed outfit, asked what was up with her attire. Alpha replied sarcastically that she thought it would be fun if they matched for a change. Akira countered that this wasn't exactly the time for fashion statements. Alpha agreed and said she had something much more relevant to share. She continued, informing him that one of their enemies had just entered the building. Akira asked how they could fit inside. Alpha explained that the enemy had left her powered armor outside, which was all part of her plan to neutralize their armor by luring them into a confined space. However, they still didn't know for sure how much this would actually weaken her. Akira shrugged, stating that dragging one of them out of those wearable tanks was good enough for him, and he asked where the enemy was located. Using Alpha's AR support, she pinpointed Akira's enemy. Now that he knew where they were, he thought they could lure her into a spot where he could shoot. But then he noticed that his enemy was staring directly at him, which puzzled Akira. Nelia smiled menacingly, and Alpha immediately told Akira to get down. He dropped to the ground just in time, as his bag was cut off in an instant. As he lay on the floor, memories rushed back. He had once used a knife like that. It was an old-world weapon, and he wondered how she got her hands on one. Did she find it in the tunnels? As Akira stood up, he noticed blood near him, and nerves began to creep in. Did she cut him? He knew he had dodged, but as he looked closely, he saw Alpha's severed corpse nearby, and instinctively shouted her name. Would you look at that? Another Gojo fan. Meanwhile, Nelia believed she had Akira cornered, but as she examined her handiwork, she realized she had only gotten his bag. Not one to be deterred, she still felt triumphant because she had captured his friend. To dodge Nelia's attack, Akira had to be able to see her too. Nelia grumbled to herself that she had just wasted a perfectly good relic trying to kill him. Surviving that was just wasteful. But she didn't dwell on it long. She still had plenty of other relics and old-world weapons at her disposal. Using her newly acquired old-world knife, she sliced through the wall in front of her, shaping it into a diamond, and kicked it away, creating an entrance. Stepping through the newly carved doorway, she taunted Akira not to go anywhere because she would be carving him up soon enough. Worriedly, Akira approached Alpha and reached out to her, but to his shock, his hand passed right through her head. Alpha quickly calmed him down, explaining that the me he could see was entirely just a visual representation. She was merely showing him what would have happened if he had been hit. Akira, puzzled, asked her what the point of that was. But Alpha assured him that his questions could wait. She insisted he needed to focus on the battle and prepare for combat. Spotting Nelia approaching, Akira picked up his rifle from the floor and fired at the wall, but it didn't pierce through. Cursing under his breath, he realized he couldn't shoot through the wall. He lamented that being on the wrong end of an old-world knife wasn't fun at all. Akira then asked what his next move should be. Alpha said his only option was to somehow get a clean shot at her. Alpha warned Akira that Nelia is coming and she told him that he needs to push his limits in the fight. That's why he nerds to grin and bear with it. Akira agreed, and told that she should try to finish it off while his limbs are still attached. Which Alpha replied that she'll do her best. This made Akira question where Alpha's usual confidence go. Alpha sarcastically said not to worry because even if Akira gets torn up a little she can still use his suit to walk him home. Which made Akira worried, but he just smiles it off trusting Alpha's plan. As Nelia continued to approach Akira, she said that since Akira's just standing still he must have assumed that she can't pull that same trick again, which she confirmed herself. Nelia said that Akira can't also shoot her through the wall. She continued and said that she can slice through it but can't foot him at with their current distance. Nelia assumed that Akira is thinking that they've reached a stalemate, but then with her old world sword she sliced through the groin like a butter and apologized because she's in a bit of a rush. She kicked it down going below the floor where Akira is at. Because of the sound and the AR support of Alpha, Akira knew that Nelia fell through the floor. He looked down where she was, and out of all of a sudden she swings her sword barely missing Akira. This made Nelia smiles like a maniac while Akira is in disbelief because she just cut his rifle on his shoulder. If he were not to move in time it would have been his head. Cheryl stared deeply out the window of her base, lost in daydreams of her and Akira joyfully riding a motorcycle together. Little did she know, just moments ago, Akira's motorcycle had been reduced to scrap in their latest skirmish. For the past 3 days, Akira had been battling Urata scorpions for his mission. Just when he thought things couldn't get crazier, the Ujima incident happened, and now he found himself facing powered robots. Talk about an upgrade in the level of difficulty.